session items. We have item A, public comments on work session items, work session related items. Those items are discussion on ambulance billing for city residents, discussion on USRDA application information, discussion on medical marijuana provisioning center, and a discussion on food trucks. We'll begin with public comments on work session related items. Any citizens that wish to make comments on a work session related items will please come forward to the podium, state your name and address, and limit your comments to 5 minutes, please. Are there any citizens that wish to make comment?
As a taxpayer in the city, on the item B, paying for the ambulance service, it seems to me that the city residents been picking up the tab for running the ambulance, for the training, for the supplies, buying a new rescue unit. I don't think the city residents should be paying for this. Taxpayer money is paying for everything, you know. Fire department, police department. I don't know what it is, the money end of it or what, but I don't think we should be going that route. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other citizens that wish to make comment on agenda-related items? If not, we'll move to the first agenda item, discussion on ambulance billing for city residents. Public Safety Director Tim Kozel and Deputy Fire Chief Heath Darling.
Good evening. I think what I'll do is I'll introduce Vanessa from Acumed. She's has a little PowerPoint to put together that she has put together that is pretty informative on the actual billing process, and I'll let her run with it for a little bit, and then we'll answer some questions. Okay?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Vanessa Zach. I am from the Acumed Group. We do the EMS billing for Manistee Fire Department. I don't know how to change the slides, but okay. Thank you. So I'm just going to go ahead and run through the PowerPoint presentation. I left the last part of the presentation for questions, but please stop me at any time if you have questions during the presentation. So the objectives today are to review the history by fiscal year. All the reports that I ran based on this PowerPoint are all run by fiscal year. We're going to discuss variables that influence the recovery rate, review policies currently in place, look at the 2011 through 2017 payer mix, resident versus non-resident billings, also look at the fee schedule, and then again, open discussion for ways to maybe optimize revenue or any questions you may have. So here's a chart that you can see. This is the charges, revenue, and contractuals by fiscal year. You can see from 2011 to 2017. Now I just want to make note, 2017 fiscal year has not completed, so that chart number is not completely accurate, but I just wanted the data there available for you to see. Charges are in the orange. Revenue, so that's money coming back into the city, is in the light blue, and then contractuals are in the purple. Just to review real quick, a contractual is based on the insurance agreements that the city has signed to accept the revenue charges. Medicare, Medicaid, and other various insurances, you have to accept their contracted rate. So that's where the contractuals come into play in the purple field there. Some variables that influence recovery, the run volume, total run volumes, which you can see on my next slide, they have steadily increased for the city over the last few years from 2011 to 2017. The run types are ALS, VLS, and treat no transport. In 2011, Manistee Fire Department only billed as a BLS service, so that's a basic life support. In 2012 is when they started to change over to an ALS, which is an advanced life support. That's an increase in revenue based on the level of service. The next thing that could help increase revenue is the establishment of medical necessity. Now, not every transport is going to be medically necessary based on the insurance requirements, but I can tell you that based on our documentation that we've received from the fire department, we have they do a great job documenting their run reports, so we are able to capture the higher revenue at the ALS versus the BLS level. And that's all based on their documentation and the information provided in their run reports. So looking at this slide, you can see the difference in ALS and BLS ratios and treat no transport. So a treatment no transport is they arrived on scene, they were called out for a possible emergency, but then the patient didn't want to be transported. That's a lower number. You don't get reimbursement for those transports, but they are still billable to some insurances. Insurances don't always pay that. Most commercial carriers do not cover, as well as Medicare and Medicaid. So then you can see the ALS and BLS here as well. You can see they have significantly raised their their ALS run volume over the years. Total run volume is listed on the chart itself. And again, 2017 is not a complete year. So just looking at their policy review of what's in place right now, I also provided a chart of total write-offs, which is in the light blue, to write-off per resident, which is in the green. So how the policies currently stand, the overall charge strategy, again, 2011 to 2014, they billed residents insurance only. So what that meant was when we received a run report, we pushed it through to insurance. Whatever insurance paid, we accepted and wrote off the balance based on that insurance only. That has since changed, and now the residents, they are sent 2 statements, which we consider soft billing. So they're sent 2 statements. They get an automated call letting them know that there is a balance on their account. And if no response from the patient, the account is then written off as write-off resident. For non-residents, they also receive 2 statements, an automated call letting them know to give us a call back because there is a balance on the account. No response, the collection account is then sent to the client for review to send to collections. Only non-residents at this time are sent to collections. So then also the city does not consider a hardship policy. Our hardship policy is just another way for maybe a non-resident who might not be able to pay the bill and just lets it go to collections. Rather than doing that, they can apply for what's called a hardship. In that case, the city would have to review whether you would like to write it off or accept the hardship, maybe at a lower amount, or write it off completely to collections. Right now, like I stated, that the city does not have that policy. The Office of Inspector General does recommend that you do have one, but it's not needed. It's not something that you have to have. We just suggest it so that you can refrain from what we call cherry picking accounts. Some residents might see that, so it's always good to have that hardship policy in place. Next is your payer mix. This is a demographic showing from 2011 to 2017 what the active payer mix is for City of Manistee. You can see that you do have a high Medicare and Medicaid payer mix. Again, Medicare and Medicaid have a set fee schedule that we have to adhere to. So anything that they do not cover is then written off as a contractual based on their agreements. You do have some commercial, it's a small amount compared to your Medicare and Medicaid, and you have a very small self-pay, which is great. You see more reimbursement come back from your insurance carriers than you do with a self-pay. Generally, there's a 2 to 3% return rate with a self-pay patient. Here you can see the resident versus non-resident billings. So over the years from 2011 to 2017, the city has run on mostly residents. And I just wanted to throw that in because a lot of the talk is about the resident versus non-resident billings. So you can see that most of your population that's run on for transports is a resident transport. The last thing that I have here is the fee schedule. This is the last fee schedule update for City of Manistee. Fees were in January of 2018. The current fees that the city charges are in the Manistee fees column. The suggested fees are in the suggested fee column. So the reason that suggested fees are provided are, again, because of that, because of the fee schedule that's provided by Medicare and Medicaid. This suggested fees is a percentage with the Medicare Medicaid fee schedule, what we think you're going to capture the most of. And so as you can see, the Manistee fees fall right within that fee range, so that's good. Usually if you go higher than that, you're going to see an increase of contractuals or an increase of write-offs of non-collectible payments. Also, the fees that are listed are within the suggested fee range, and then I also wanted to make note that the Congress did pass a recent 2% add-on for urban and rural ambulance providers. This increased the Medicare allowable amount of each level of service by 2%, which again is factored into the suggested fees already, so they're still in line with the increase. So that's the last slide that I have. Do you have any questions specifically for me in regards to this PowerPoint or in ambulance billing in general?
I have a question.
Sure.
On the building. You stated that we would, 2 months, 2 billing cycles, a call, and then you would write it off for a resident.
Yes.
On that billing, is there anything that says, after 2 months, I'm gonna write this off?
On the last statement that they receive, it tells them that they need to contact our office, otherwise there could be further, how is it worded? There could be further action with your account. It doesn't say that it's going to collection, it just said that there could be further action on the account. They still receive a phone call during that last statement being mailed out.
Okay, and you are billing for the difference between what their insurance will pay and what the actual cost is. Is that what you're billing for?
Correct. So if I have patient A who transported ALS emergency, so at the top level of service. Let's say that that run is $700. We bill their insurance and they have a Medicare insurance. Medicare will say they'll only pay $442.15. So then $200 of that is considered a contractual. Well, if the patient does not have a secondary insurance, we are still able to balance bill that patient their 80-20, which a Medicare plan has an 80% to 20%, where the patient owes 20%. So that $200 that might be left is the patient's responsibility based on the 20%. So we will bill for the $200. If no response from that patient, it's then just written off as a resident non-collectible.
Okay, but nowhere does it tell the resident what their rights are as far as a city resident on your billing?
No, God, no, it doesn't. Okay. No, we're still billing. We just tell them that there could be further action taken on their account. Nowhere does it state that we're going to just go ahead and write off this balance.
So is this your policy? Is this a city policy that you've been told to do?
This is a city policy that we've been told to do.
City has told you to do this?
Correct. Okay. Yep.
I guess I don't understand if the bill is $700 and they pay like $470, got an 80-20. Last I did my math, it's $140 difference.
Sure.
Okay, you used 200 just for a number, okay.
Yeah, I was just throwing out a number,
Okay.
sorry.
Right.
Yeah, I wasn't doing the full math breakdown, but just saying with any Medicare plan in general, it doesn't matter what, if they have straight Medicare, it's an 80-20 plan. 80% is paid by the insurance, 20% as long as it's a medically necessary service. Now, there are times where the city will run and it's not a medically necessary service. We bill it to insurance, they deny for the whole balance. They're not gonna pay $1 of it. So then we bill the patient based on non-medically necessary service. And that just happens. That's for maybe John Smith who goes for a toothache. Well, I'm sorry, John, it's been 3 weeks you've had a toothache. That's not medically necessary in Medicare's eyes. It's not us at the billing. It's not the fire department telling them no. It's Medicare saying we're not going to pay for this service. They could have went by another means such as taxi cab, family member, so on and so forth. So they're liable for that entire bill. Insurance isn't going to cover their 80-20.
But if it was a city resident and you sent me 2 bills and you're gonna write it off?
We don't instruct them of that, but yes.
But yes.
But based on the policy that we have in place at Acumed, once we receive no notification back from the patient, it's then written off.
Okay.
When you write off any of the balances, is this reported to a credit service at all? Does it go against their credit?
Not for a resident. For non-residents, it is.
Okay.
Again, that's based on the policy that we're following.
But if I'm paying my taxes, why do I have to pay that?
That's a great question. Again, it's not a decision that I make. It's a decision that the city will have to make for their residents or non-residents.
Is it possible to get a copy of that policy? Do you have it? I mean, do you have when I say policy, I'm thinking of something you have in front of you that if you have a question, you look and know, the policy says this.
Right. We have something that we follow, calling it a collection account transfer criteria. It tells us what the client has told us to do and follow based on their policies. That I can provide you, and this was maybe written in an email or based on a fee schedule that they had sent back to us. It was in writing by the client and signed off And then we put it in our criteria sheet, and that's what we follow. So I can give you this, but I don't have it where it's signed off by the city.
Okay.
Does the city have something like that?
Should, I could look for it, yeah.
If not, when I get back to my office, I can always send what we do have to the fire department. They can pass it along. It's just, like I said, it's usually put in writing on either a fee change form, what we call is, so when they were implementing new fees, they might have put new instructions on that fee change form, and that's where we get the information on what to follow. So if I obviously have it in writing somewhere, I'm more than happy to provide that to the city. If
I have to admit that I was kind of naive when it comes to soft billing. I had never heard that term before.
Sure.
I had no idea what it meant.
Yeah.
So I started to get I got on the internet, and I started doing some research. And oddly enough, EMS soft billing was probably one of the first things that popped up.
Sure.
So I kind of looked that over and read it, and most areas, most townships or cities that have their own ambulance service, they send people billing information. In other words, they fill out a form, the
Yes.
billing information. Even if you don't have insurance, you have to send that in. It's wrote off, but then they bill the company for it, or the insurance company. In fact, it even goes so far as to talk about you have a deductible, like Medicare has a deductible. We do this for you so that it lowers your deductible. The insurance company will automatically take that off and only pay the balance, but that balance that they do pay is considered payment in full. But it explains all of that on the letter that they receive and the information that they have.
So on the invoice that they received, it tells them the data service that they ran on, what the level of service was, what the total amount. There are some times where maybe we weren't able to obtain insurance at the time of service because of whatever the event was. We ask the patient for that information within this invoice. It does say that this could be applied to your insurance deductible or co-insurance. If they choose not to return that, again, it's on the resident or non-resident to return the information to us. We do our due diligence of trying to obtain the information from the hospitals. We call patients to try to obtain the information. So if it's ever lacking and it's not there for some reason, which again, I want to commend the fire department, they do a great job at getting that information. I have other clients that don't at all. So they do a great job, but there are times where that information is not supplied. The other thing is, if a patient signature is not present on the run report itself, we cannot bill insurance. A patient has to sign for their services being rendered. Now, there are extenuating circumstances, for example, a cardiac arrest. Obviously, we're not going to get a patient signature. Medicare says, okay, fine, you're still able to bill that. But we still have to send, if that, for some reason, the extenuating circumstance doesn't exist, we still have to obtain that signature. If the patient does not return that, again, it's gonna be written off as a resident, write-off resident, because they never return the information needed in order to bill it.
Okay, so if you were to ask the question, since this policy that we've started where we send this soft billing, we call it, how many people have paid, would you be able to tell me?
How many residents have
How
paid?
many residents have paid the soft billing?
I believe I can get some numbers for you on that, yes. Not at this moment, but I would.
Yeah, I understand that.
Okay.
Yeah, I know that, yeah.
Yeah.
We did pose that
we did.
question,
Oh.
and it was, the figures I was given was approximately 1/3 additional fees have been collected in that manner, so.
I guess I'm not attacking you, okay?
Oh, no.
I'm not.
I understand.
My only concern with this whole policy is that the citizens are not informed that this is a free service. This was sold as a free service. It was never sold as a medically necessary service. It was sold as a free service, and it was gonna be a revenue maker for the city. I sat out there when they talked about this and when this whole process was taking place. I think that we owe it to the taxpayer that they know that that service is available to them at no charge, because we fund it with our tax dollars. And as I look at other areas that have the same billing process, they do inform the people. They inform the people in writing that this is a procedure, this is what you have to do, and you won't get a bill, the taxpayer. So that, again, I'm not after you, I'm just after that procedure. I think that needs to be looked at. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I appreciate your
Of course.
patience with me.
Of course.
Can we get back to the revenue
Sure.
slide? Like 2011.
Yes.
I'm showing off our budget documents. Our actual 2011 charge for service transport was $5,823.
For the fiscal year of 2011?
I'm saying that's what's in our budget document. So when I see the 2011 numbers on here, it's very much a disparity. You're showing here, what, $70,000? In our budget for 2012, 2013 shows in the actual 2011 was $5,823.
You're talking about revenue coming in or the charges?
I'm charge for service, transport. That is a revenue to the city from the transport service. That's a significant difference in value.
I'm not really sure how I can explain the
Okay.
difference, but that's based
You know,
on.
I think one of the things that I need to understand is, as the Mayor Pro Tem has suggested, this was sold as a service to the community. And we have West Shore College, now we have Munson, the hospital. Now we've got Munson Hospital out here. They got 4 ambulances out there. Ambulance service is available to the city. There is nothing in the historic documents that says anything about the necessity that we lost a life or we had a crisis or what service available was insufficient to meet the needs for transport in the community. The whole thing on this was that our EMS would go out because they weren't certified for transport, someone else was doing the transport and getting the revenue. And then they found out a year later, as you indicate, when it went BLS to ALS, that, wow, you know, about half of the transports are ALS instead of BLS. We need to go to ALS so we can get all the money. We went down to Ludington and talked to the Ludington Fire Department and their EMS. They don't do any transport. They call for an ambulance if a transport's needed. They don't bill anything to citizens because the citizens are paying for the EMS service in the community, as was indicated by our citizen.
Sure.
I think, you know, I'm looking at this, $455 for a treatment, no transport. And we've got a community, I would say a fairly solid and responsible community. If you send me a bill for something and it says that Medicare paid for this, or in my example, Medicare paid this much, TRICARE paid this much, this is what's allowable, you owe me $80 for a deductible, and I'm probably going to write you a check and send it to you. And I think what Mayor Pro Tem Zelinski's getting at is, I'm under no obligation to do that. Nobody tells me that.
Well, when they do receive the invoice, if we are able to bill the insurance, that's all written on the invoice itself. It's laid out what the contractual is that the patient will receive. They also receive an explanation of benefits directly from their insurance stating what is covered at what percentage and what's written off as contractual and what their responsibility is. Now, that doesn't come directly from us, but that does come directly from their insurance carrier. Because they have, that goes based on deductibles and the coinsurance again. Some patients that might have a HMO plan have different deductibles and coinsurance. It's not the 80-20 like Medicare. Now, back in 2011 to 2014, you did, I think when it was originally started up as a service, you did insurance-only billing, where we billed the insurance, whatever the patient has given us, we billed insurance, whatever was covered, whatever wasn't was written off. There was no charge or no bill that was dropped to the patient. You can definitely go back to that if you were saying that the patients are city taxpayers and that's where you're getting the funding from. Residents, sure, if you don't want them to pay, that's fine. Go back to insurance-only billing, to where you bill their insurance and everything else is written off.
I don't think it's a matter of we don't want the residents to pay. The residents are paying $1,034,000 for fire and EMS this year. If you think that's not paying, then I would say we got a different point of view here.
No.
I'm saying to charge them on top of what they've already paid.
Sure.
I think is a bit over the top.
Sure.
I mean,
And it's entirely up to what the city would like to do. And again, we're for changing the policy based on whatever you guys determine is fit for your residents. I live in a city where they do not charge us either for the transports. It's write-off insurance only. So I give them my insurance, and whatever the insurance covers, if nothing, then they write off the balance. You can definitely go back to that because they do pay the city taxes. I agree. I do the same thing. I understand that logic completely. I just want to present the facts to you on what I seen when I pulled the numbers.
That is very much appreciated. I appreciate that.
You're
And-
welcome.
And, you know, and I think the thing is, I don't think anybody questions the professionalism and the qualifications and the dedication of the people that are providing the service. I think everybody's got great appreciation, you know, in regard for that. But I think, you know, what we're looking at here is the cost factor and what it's costing the residents. You know, to be honest with you, if they have to make a run to Fowler Township or Manistee Township and want to charge them, I'd say good, write a bill for it. They're not paying taxes, they're not paying for the service.
Sure.
We should be entitled to some compensation for providing that service, not at the expense of someone in the city needing the service, because that's what city taxpayers are paying for. But, you know, I look at the cost, and of course, I'm going to say part of my argument for when we get into the budgeting process, because it belongs more in budgeting than it does in this. We want to know what the building was. I was concerned. I see we're about roughly 80% resident and 20% non-resident.
Yes.
You don't have anything that would indicate how many transports we do to other than our local hospital?
Then the local hospital?
Yeah, I've got those figures available.
Okay.
Yeah, there's
What
not.
what
there's-
happens when we do that? Mr.
So
Dyer?
it's the same thing. If it happens to be a resident, regardless of where we take them to, it's gonna be the same practice. And, you know, if they happen to only be a Medicaid patient or a self-pay or a full pay, it's the same amount. I mean, granted, the bill's higher based on mileage, but that same write-off still applies regardless of where they're taken.
If we have to transport to Grand Rapids or to Traverse City, do we call another crew in to man the fire station
Yes,
overtime?
yes.
I just have one more comment, and I'm kind of hung up on this, that when this all started back, when they started the ambulance and went through these steps and got to where we're at today, I sat out there as a taxpayer, and I heard it sold on the fact that it was a free service to the citizens of the city of Manistee, that you would never be billed or expected to pay. And I would like to go one step further to say that if we bill people and they paid it, whether they're old and they're out of fear of not getting service next time they need it, or for whatever the reason they paid that billing, I think we owe them money back. I think that if we did not inform them of the process, that we were going to send you 2 bills, and if you didn't pay it, we'd write it off, then I think we were wrong. I think that is not right. We just should have never done that. That is just wrong for me personally. I just think it's wrong.
Well, I think it's more directed to the city rather than you.
Yeah,
but,
right. Yeah.
That's gonna involve a little
Yeah,
more
it's not,
in-depth
it doesn't
review of our
involve you.
city
I'm just saying that I think that that's.
Lots of questions. You come into the fire pit here
That's
and people
okay.
have questions. and,
No, I get
yeah,
it.
We weren't, I mean, we didn't have privilege to see the presentation before tonight. So, I mean, when it pops up, there's bound to be some questions as a result of that.
They're valid questions. I completely understand, as being a resident of a city that does the same thing that, maybe not the soft billing, but the insurance only, I get it. And as a taxpayer, I get it. There's been so many changes with the industry over the last years, so please take into consideration that as well. It's not like the fire department is saying, we want to charge more. They're saying, no, we don't want to charge more, but the insurance keeps giving us all these guidelines, and they're setting these fees and they're setting these rates. So that's where the charges are coming in from, when they might have first considered it being a free service. Again, you can go back to the insurance only, but just the industry as a whole has changed. So I just want to put that out there too, because it's constantly changing, and especially with the increase in the Medicaid recipients, that's also become a huge factor. So I would just consider all avenues, looking at it all the way around.
Just one quick question.
Yeah,
one more.
absolutely.
You mentioned that where you're from,
Yes.
the city writes it off, or whatever. How did you know about that?
I work for the city.
Okay,
So
but
that's how
I mean,
other than that, I didn't know.
How would any other citizen know about it?
Just by calling the city. That's the only, we didn't know, I didn't know of it prior to having my position with the Acumed Group.
Oh.
Other than that, as a city resident of City of Trenton, I did not know that they did that policy either. So it might, maybe if I attended the council meetings, I might have learned it, but other than that, I did not know.
Okay, so if you used an ambulance in your area and would they send you a bill? Or would they just send you an explanation of the benefits paid?
Well, the insurance, no matter what, would send me an explanation of benefits, but they would send me a zero pay invoice. So what that would say is, you ran on this day, we billed your insurance, no coverage, written off. There would just be a write-off line of whatever the total amount was written off. It wouldn't say why, it would just say write-off. And at that point, it would prompt me as a resident to say, okay, why is it being written off? Did I miss something? That would prompt me to call.
Yeah, that's more along the line of what I see when I look at the internet for.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Thank
we-
you for your
And we
patience.
get plenty of those calls. I think in 2014, we just reviewed the way we were doing things with insurance only. Saw if there was any money being left on the table, was there a way to recover any of it? And by doing soft billing, some of it was recovered. It's not a large amount, but I think it was just a decision at the time to try to get a little bit more of what was being left on the table. I can say, as the person that takes most of the calls from the citizens with billing concerns, more times than not, I explain to them what our billing practice is, and that they're not gonna be sent to collection, and that those charges over and above what their insurance is covering is being written off. But I've also received phone calls from people saying, hey, we used your service, I haven't gotten a bill yet, is there something wrong? And these are people that legitimately wanna pay what they feel is their portion of the service. I give them the same explanation, but it is some of those people that insist on paying over and above what their insurance is covered as well. So I mean, there's two sides to every coin. That's certainly not the majority. And if this council chooses to go back to insurance-only billing, it's simply a policy change that we can go right back to. But like I said, I requested those figures, and I want to say that we were recovering about 1/3 more than we were before with our residents. The amount that's being written off for our residents with soft billing, we were collecting about 1/3 more than we were at just insurance only.
Well, I would like to recommend that we look at the policy and change it to just bill the insurance to our residents, because
I would suggest before council entertains that idea that we take a look at the revenue ramifications and how it's gonna impact our budget, because there could be a significant revenue loss, and that might be something council would be interested in knowing before they make that change.
Where does that revenue go to?
I would be interested in the numbers, especially since I noticed some disparity in the numbers that I have from budgets that I have right in front of me versus the numbers that were shown on the chart. Like I said, the 2012 budget shows the 2011 actual at $5,800. They're showing $70,000. That's a pretty significant difference.
I think they were showing more than 70, if you wanna go back to that slide. They got 70,000, 84,000, and
Revenue.
160,000.
They're showing the revenue at 70,280, but
Right.
I get At the budget document here, it shows 5,800, so,
We can take a look at it.
I think that chart is off of a year because we've already completed our fiscal year 2017, so I think the numbers need to be slid over one if I'm not mistaken, just on a cursory view of the stuff. But Vanessa be able to, it's Vanessa.
Yes.
You'd be able to check.
Would-
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
we've already completed our 2017.
would it be possible for you to leave a copy of the presentation? I would like to have a copy myself for my own files.
I can
We have a copy.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
have it,
okay.
yeah.
Copy.
I uploaded it.
I don't want to ask for anything proprietary or anything like that, but
This is all your data, so
I'm a history buff. I like to keep things
I understand. Yeah,
to refer to. So
I'm curious too, if it being off that much, so I'm not really, I have no explanation for that, to be honest with you.
I have a question for you, Vanessa.
Sure.
You might not be able to,
That's the 2000.
I don't know if you have a way to sort this out. I'm just
This
curious
year's
how many
budget.
people who are on Medicare, who have the
2016,
Part A
I've
and
got
Part
all
B,
of them,
also
yeah.
have supplemental insurance? Is there any,
We may be able to factor a
I put
report
over
in.
I was
here what
curious.
was
Yeah,
budgeted
it's a little bit
the
harder,
previous year
because we run
versus-
things on primary payers or, there's a report that we can run based on primary payer. We may be able to create a report that shows if they have a secondary. I can always try to run that information when I get back to the office, definitely.
yeah, I'm curious.
Sure.
I would
Yeah,
venture a guess, it might be as much as 50% have a secondary insurance.
I would think so too.
There's a significant amount of write-off that occurs here, so.
And again, like Vanessa said, that's largely on account of contractuals that they set the rate at Medicare and Medicaid, and we're not permitted to charge anything above that. And that's the healthcare industry as a whole summed up right there.
I think you can charge it, but you're just not gonna get it.
You're not gonna get it, right?
Exactly. So it's just
Right.
gonna make your
Yeah.
write-offs look worse and worse and
Yeah.
worse the more you try.
Well, a couple months ago, I got a bill from U of M for $17,000 for surgery, and the Medicare, TRICARE only allowed like 3,200 or something like that, and there was a code by it, and I looked up the code, and it said by law, that was all they were allowed to charge, and they were not allowed to charge me for the difference between what was billed and what the allowable rate was. But then different entities paid different things, and it says mine was zero.
Hmm,
I
that's
like the
good.
zero.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what you looked up was part of the contractual obligation. So it was probably a CO and then a number, or a couple letters and then a number. That's considered a contractual obligation. That's what the insurances give back to us, saying, no, you cannot bill this to the patient. You legally have to write it off based on your contractual agreement with the city. And there's it's not just Medicare and Medicaid, I just want to make that perfectly clear. There are other insurances that come into play with that. Your self-pays obviously do not have a contractual obligation. They're responsible for the entire bill themselves, because they do not have insurance other than resident, however you want to proceed with that. But most insurances nowadays have a contractual obligation. Your Blue Cross, Blue Shield, your Medicares, your Medicaids, all of your HMOs have a contractual. And you have to legally sign with them in order to even receive payment from the insurance companies. So they have you no matter what.
Thank you, and I hope you didn't take anything I said personally.
Oh,
or-
not at all. No,
I'm just trying to
Not,
understand.
absolutely, and this is, like I was telling Heath, this is an industry, the whole making of EMS and fire service is an industry on its own. You can't really lump it in with the hospital because you can prove medical necessity at the hospital. It's based on the diagnosis, the doctor's charting. They do a great job writing their run reports. Doesn't always mean that it's medically necessary based on Medicare's criteria, and we follow Medicare's criteria for everything because their rules are so strict.
Yeah,
So
I understand Medicare criteria. It took me a year to get an ambulance bill paid for my mother. I
Oh.
finally won.
sure,
Yes.
yeah. So
Finally,
you had to go
after a
through an
year.
appeal process then,
Yeah.
probably. Yes,
Yes.
it's not easy. They're not easy to deal with at all, Medicare or Medicaid. So it is a constant fight for us, but we're trying to get the most revenue for the city in general. And if you want to go back to the insurance only billing, it is a quick call to me. He puts it in writing based on what you all decide, and that it is implemented immediately based on the data service that we have in effect for. So
Thanks again.
You're welcome.
Mr. Taylor, is it available that we could get a copy of when this originally started?
Are you talking about the policy that was
Yes.
put, yeah, I've got a note to take a look at that.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for your time.
Anything else I can answer for you in the same lines?
I'm just curious, like Mr. Gabowski, I'd like to know, I know the policy we started out on, I don't know when it changed. I attended all the council meetings, I don't ever remember it coming before council.
Yeah, it changed,
just-
I want to say it changed in 2014. I'm not certain that it came before council or not. Like Mr. Taylor said, we'd have to do some digging to
Okay.
see where that change actually went to Acumed. But I believe it was in 2014, I just don't have the specifics.
I'm just curious of when the change was made, who made it, and how it happened.
We'll find it for you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much. The next item, item C, the discussion on USRDA application information, Public Works Director and City Engineer.
Good evening, Council. Our favorite topic, CSO 18 and how we pay for it. We are in the process of looking for funding, rural development, USDA rural development funding, and there's applications we're in the process of submitting. So today, our presentation is on that. Two applications, basically they're two different types of projects. We're going to briefly talk about it, and I'm also going to present today. I have John Bradley from our office. He's a experienced engineer in the rehabilitation of sewers. He's done a lot of sewer separation projects and rehab projects. And then Brian House. He is our wastewater treatment plant pump station expert. That's the type of work he's involved with. So they're going to help with the presentation as well. So just overview. I'm gonna kind of quickly hit on some things we've already talked about, but the intention of this meeting is not just for council, but for the public. So we're gonna briefly hit on a few things that we have seen here as a group many times, but I'll move through that pretty quickly. Talk about the CSOs we've had over the last 3 years to get a little sense of how many in magnitude, and visit the corrective action plan, the NPDS permit, and our schedule and our deadlines, how we're tracking with those. And then we're going to discuss basically these two applications. What we're referring to as Phase 1 and Phase 2. Phase 1 is a sewer rehabilitation lining project, and Phase 2 is work done by the treatment plant that we're looking at alternatives for storage, treatment, and conveyance of water in that area, wastewater. And then we briefly talk about where we're headed with a few next steps. We've had these discussions on the history of the city. We hit these because they really really outline how we got to where we are today. So really quick, 1890s, with the city's wastewater collection system and stormwater was constructed basically with ditches and pipes that ran directly to Manistee Lake and to the river. They're a direct route straight down the hill into the rivers. In the 30s, an interceptor was built that literally intercepted those pipes before they got to the river and then conveyed it to a wastewater treatment plant that was built around the same time, the current location of the city's wastewater treatment plant. Those pipes weren't designed to take all that flow, so overflows were designed to allow excess water to flow out of these structures and into the river or into the lake. There was 20 of those around the city, and I'll show you a graphic of that real quickly. From that point on, after the treatment plant was built and the interceptor was built, the system is continued to expand with projects, adding neighborhoods, subdivisions, etc. This graphic here, all the green dots represent all the historical CSOs that were in place when the interceptor was built. So those are all the historical locations where direct discharges to the river were designed. It was part of the planning. And they were intentionally designed to allow excess water to flow out of the pipes and into the river. the one that's circled in red is CSO 18. That is the last remaining CSO we have in the system today. That is at a very key location in the system, and excess water really needs a relief point. So that is our target to eliminate. When we get rid of CSO 18 and we can safely do that, we will essentially meet the state's requirements of eliminating.
Mr. Middleton, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Real quick? On these 18 CSOs that you have identified here, when you say excess water, that is excess water from the combined sewer and water.
It's the
overflow.
storm.
So it was diluted.
True,
That was
yes.
going in from all 18 locations.
So historically, before those were eliminated, the pipes that went to the river had some capacity. They were designed to take both stormwater and wastewater, so they were larger pipes, and they went right to the river. Then when it was intercepted with this pipe that runs along the river and then back to the plant, it was too costly to try and collect all that water, because rainwater just has a lot of volume, a lot of flow to it. So what the idea is, they put in a smaller pipe, relatively smaller, along the river and along the lake shore, and that handles all the day-to-day wastewater. So any of our normal flows that come, from waste, the human waste, that can handle that and bring it to the plant. When it rains, because that was a combined system then, that excess water comes down the hill, hits this new pipe that can't handle all that water. So the excess, in essence, is what goes into the lake, and that is primarily mostly stormwater. So it is diluted.
Also sewage that was diluted in the water.
Absolutely.
Upstream. Okay.
Yes, it includes both. Yes, wastewater, sewage, and stormwater.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, go back. What's the one that's circled in red?
Looks like there's two.
Two circles or two?
One circled in blue, one circled in red. You're
Okay.
talking about the one circled in red?
Okay. The one in blue is what we're called CSO 18. That is literally a weir that's in a box that separates the wastewater side from the stormwater side. And so that one that's in blue is where that structure is. And you'll see some other graphics a little later that Brian will show you. That'll give you a little better idea where it flows. But in general, what happens is in that area where the blue box is, when the wastewater fills up, because stormwater's in it, it hits a point, goes over a weir, spills into a stormwater pipe that goes right out to the red circle. That's behind Morton, and that's a stormwater outfall that primarily takes stormwater 90% of the time. But when we have a CSO, that CSO water travels through that storm pipe until it reaches that other circle there, the one by the lake. Does that answer your question? Okay. And we've been through a lot of this history, but a couple key things here is, the city has gone through a very extensive sewer separation project over decades. And the system today is considered separated. It no longer is considered a combined sewer system. So wastewater is supposed to be in wastewater pipes and stormwater is supposed to be in stormwater pipes. That was declared by the DEQ not too long ago, and so we now are basically regulated as a separated system. We've done a lot of work in the SAW grant collecting data, flow monitoring. We've done smoke and dye testing. We're learning a lot of things about the system, where inflow and infiltration are, and what the condition of our pipes are. Specific to combined sewer overflows, we installed a transducer at the beginning of 2015. And we did that so we could really accurately monitor how much water goes over the weir. It's been, in the past, it's been a little bit more of a guesstimate because it's periodically checked and estimated. When we installed the transducer, we are constantly monitoring that weir, and so we can get a very accurate count of the amount of water going over it. So since that was installed, we've seen 25 separate CSO events in the last 3 years. Those range from 150,000 gallons all the way up to 12.4 million gallons. The 12.4 million gallons was in 2016 and was a little bit of a unique outlier in that it was near the end of the snowmelt and was exceptionally large compared to all the other ones. 24 of the 25 events are less than 6 million gallons. Most of these fall in a category of between 1 and 5 million gallons of these CSO events. We do monitor the rate of flow over that weir as well. That's real important for us in planning purposes and conveying this water back to the treatment plant. You'll see that on upcoming slides. We monitor rainfall amounts, and rainfall amounts have ranged between roughly 1 inch and 3.6 inches that caused all these different CSO events. Some of them were concurrently with snow melt, so that caused excess water to run off. The reason I mentioned that rainfall is the DEQ is requiring us to design to a certain standard, and that standard is, they call it a remedial design storm for whatever purpose that means, but for Manistee it means 3.9 inches of rain in 24 hours. So that's what they're expecting us to design for. And we've never seen that event yet. We've never had that much rain in 24 hours. So our data is statistical. We're looking at rainfall events and amount of volume of flow and kind of projecting that out. And we're working closely with the DEQ on that, determining that volume that we need to design for. Overall, the trends do seem to actually be decreasing a little bit. So even in these 3 years, as we move buildings, commercial, residential properties, there's been a reduction in the size of the CSOs and durations. You've seen this slide before. Why don't we just plug CSO 18, call it good, and walk away from this? It only costs $30,000 to $50,000 to build a wall and cut that off. The problem is that flow that I just talked about, those CSO events, has to go someplace. And we can't just shove it through the plant because we'll have violations with the DEQ because we have too much flow going through our plant. We could actually hurt the plant's biology because we wash things through it. And so it's not an option just to run it through the plant out to the lake. So we have to restrict it, and when we do that, that backs up in this pipe that's shown in red here, and all those orange buildings are susceptible to basement flooding with sewage if we didn't have this pressure release valve, as what we refer to as CSO 18. We've seen this plenty of times too, the discharge permit, but we're currently working under a permit that was issued about a year ago. And the key item in this permit that I want to hit on is the corrective action plan. We know that the city wants to get rid of CSO 18 in these events, but probably more importantly, the DEQ is mandating it. We have to get rid of it, and that's through the corrective action plan. So we have been involved with this for, I guess it's about 15 months now. We submitted the action plan in January of 2017. It took the DEQ probably 2-3 months to get back with us. They actually officially approved it about 4 or 5 months after that date. Similar to that, this last January, we submitted our update to that. We gave them an update on how we're proceeding, where we're at. We're still waiting for a response on that from the MDEQ. It's been 2-3 months. And I just want to point that out because the city's doing their part. We're doing everything in our part to hit these deadlines. And this is a very intense schedule. This is very compressed. And so far we're hitting them, but we have some concerns because there's been a long lag in response. And so we're pushing the DEQ to get answers so we can get to the next steps because everything is kind of a domino effect. So we have to submit a complete basis of design in June in a couple of months. That will be the final answer to this in terms of what we're going to build, and we'll talk a little bit more about what we're thinking so far. And then we go into plans available in March. We have to commence construction in July of 2019 and be done with construction in November of 2020. So to summarize, before I'm going to turn it over to these guys to talk about some of our alternatives. The city sewer system is separated. We've eliminated all the CSOs except for 18. The NPDS permit mandates we close it. We know there's impacts if we just close it without doing something, and that includes reducing I&I and storing excess water, which we'll talk about. We have to implement the corrective action plan, and all of that, in addition to being a short deadline, takes money. And so we have been kind of in parallel trying to figure out how to fund these improvements, along with trying to meet the cap requirements. We were working with the USDA Rural Development Group on funding sources, and that is in the forms of loans with potential for grants, but mostly in the forms of loans. We're submitting 2 separate applications. The first one we've talked to you briefly about in the past. It's a notice, it's a rehabilitation project where we're gonna line pipes, and John's gonna talk about that. And then the second phase, phase 2, which we're just kind of at the beginning point of that application, that has to do with conveying water from CSO 18 to the plant, storing this water so it can be treated back through the plant. And so that whole process, Brian is going to give you some of our preliminary thoughts and alternatives on that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to John.
Good evening, everyone. So as Sean said, I'm kind of the sewer guy. So I work in the dirt, I'm outside. Brian's the process guy. He works at the wastewater plant and pump stations and such. So as Sean indicated earlier, within the CAP, the corrective action plan, there was 2 main items that we wanted to emphasize that we developed with the DEQ in the city to come up with a solution to eliminate CSO 18. One was to mitigate the I&I within the system, the infiltration and inflow, and the other is the component that Brian's going to speak about in terms of the storage and the treatment. So we essentially have a couple different alternatives that we chose. We're looking at straight replacement, and we're also looking at trenchless technology. So Jeff happened to bring me, okay, thank you, sir. He happened to bring me a piece of cured in place pipe. That's what CIPP is, and it's technology has been around for about 70 years. It's been tried and true. Basically what you do is you're taking a resin-filled impregnated felt sock that you blow into a pipe, put some pressure on it, heat it with a catalyst. In this case, it's either steam or water, and it hardens and it becomes its own pipe. It can stand on its own. That host pipe that was there to begin with doesn't need to be there, but it's a pretty, it's not very invasive. You know, there are some disruptions and things that occur, but it's by far pretty tame in terms of what you have to do in terms of open cutting, things of that nature.
Just a quick question.
Yes, sir.
A few years ago down in Michigan Municipal League, they were, it seemed like every year they get to where they can do a larger pipe. You know how large of a pipe they can do now?
Depending on the circumstances, they can go fairly large. Standard ranges is usually between 6-inch and 96-inch. Maybe not quite 96-inch. There is a threshold.
Bigger than anything we've got.
Yes, bigger, yeah.
Bigger
Yep.
than anything. I know they started out pretty small at first, and then all of a sudden they started expanding to where it was awesome what they could do with that. Yeah.
So we're gonna explore those two options that we're gonna do to try to mitigate that I&I, and we're gonna do it by the cured in place lining technology that'll seal the pipe up, takes care of any structural defects that we may have, and then we can I don't want to even call it a day, but essentially that'll be a closed system.
It also will cut the laterals.
That's absolute. Could you explain more? Cut the laterals.
When I was down in the Michigan Municipal League, I was kind of impressed because they talked about lining the pipe, and then they had a machine that went down and actually would cut the laterals.
That's correct. So we're gonna get to this further,
Okay.
but they'll reinstate the ladders. I'm gonna call it reinstate. They have a robotic cutter that goes in there, and it's got a camera, and they can go in there and they can see that service that's there, and they can go ahead and robotically cut it out.
I think that's neat. Thank you.
So during the selection process, we had to we wanted to look at those areas from our, the city's currently in the SAW program right now, trying to get through that. And as part of that, we used our asset management plan data that was gathered from the televising collection and our assessments out in the field and such for the pipes. So we evaluated the software asset management data, and as Sean indicated earlier, we also utilized the flow monitoring program to identify those areas within the city carrying the greatest contribution of infiltration and inflow. So I'm going to show this pipe here, and it looks kind of like a stoplight. We got red, green, and blue, or red, green, blue, red, green, yellow, and and the red is going to indicate that we have a pipe that has a lot of structural issues. It indicates on the map right now, I put LOF, that I should have wrote it out, that's likelihood of failure. That's basically the structural condition of the pipe. Red is the most efficient and probably requires attention in the near future. Regardless of how RD1 works out, I just note to the council that this project was already being identified as a capital improvement plan as part of the SAW project process. So even without the involvement of rural development, this would have been on the city's radar to forecast and budget for to do improvements on.
Oh, could you go back to that slide?
Yes,
again?
ma'am.
Thank you.
Is there a zoom feature? Do you want? I apologize. I can only make it so big. Try to make sure
So
I
if
capture.
it's just a gray, like you know, if it's just a gray line, which is obviously part of somebody's street, what does the gray line mean? It doesn't
It
fall
doesn't-
into any of those categories then?
Correct. There's a threshold. There's an evaluation and condition assessment process. Some of the areas may be. You're right. That's exactly what the case is.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. So Sean talked about the full monitoring program and, you know, the amount of gallons of I&I that, you know, contribute to the plant and the back and the surcharging and the backflow and back to the CSO and whatnot. And in these areas, it's good to note that the red and the orange districts on the map are the highest contributors within the system on a per gallon per foot, you know, per linear foot of sewer that's in the ground in that district. And so over here we have, you know, District 6, 7, 5, just, you know, have to remember those, just realize that those are the worst areas that we found as a contributor. And then, you know, if you look at them as a whole, on a percentage basis, they account for over 50% of the contribution in the entire city. So we made a holistic approach to attack those areas that had the highest contribution of I&I, along with those pipes in these areas. And you can see that they kind of match up and they overlap. So I think it probably stands to reason that, you know, we want to work in those areas specifically. So that was our focus level. I blew it up. I know you're looking at another map, but I did blow up another map a little bit greater. This is District 5. The next map is the District 6 and 7. But I think the takeaway here is the items that are identified in blue, these are pipes that will be lined. There are some other miscellaneous things that may need to happen in the district. We do have some spot repairs which will require some physical construction, but it's a very small footprint. By and far, this is a trenchless technology, so we're going to try to do the least amount of destruction or disturbance of the ground that we can. And 5 and 6 are a little bit bigger. In District 5, there's actually quite a bit of work in District 6. And I'm going to come back to this slide in a minute, but just to blow it up so you guys can have a better view of it. So as part of the evaluation process for rural development, you know, we want to make sure that we take a good look at the impacts that are going to be from each of these alternatives so we can come up with the best selection. And for the rehabilitation process involving the cured in place lining, there's virtually zero impacts in terms of the environment. We're going to be in the right of way. We're going to be working within the ground. There may be some minimal work that's going to happen on the surface, just if we have to do some minor repair work to the sewer that cannot be fixed by the cured in place lining process. By and far, it's going to be it's all trenchless. There will be some minor disruption to the residents as that process occurs. Typically, it's a 3 to 4 hour process, and during that point, before your lateral gets reinstated, you know, cut back open to put in service, it will be down. It takes about 3 hours to cook that pipe and cure it and then cool it down so they can put it back in service. Depending on where we're at and the conditions of the flow that's in the system, we're going to require bypass pumping to some nature, just so that they need a clean pipe to work with, and whether that's pumps and moving water around from one manhole upstream to one manhole downstream, they'll have to do that. And involved with that, with the bypass pumping and the work that's occurring, there will be some minor disruptions to traffic control for the residents. But it will be far less disturbing than full reconstruction. You know, if they have to go in and tear the street up to replace the sewer, it's going to be very time intensive. That road's going to be closed longer. It's going to cause more, you know, concerns, the delay time for the residents and things of that nature. And it's much more costly, as we're going to see in the next slide. After doing our evaluations, our likelihood of, our life cycle costs and our benefit rate, analysis, we determined that rehabilitation in this district, which is, for this project, which is approximately 8 miles, is gonna be about $4.5 million. That same cost is about double if you wanna replace the sewer in its entirety. So, after all that feasibility study, our recommended project is gonna be rehabilitation utilizing trenchless technologies such as cured in place lining, and then, we're gonna move on to Brian's portion, but I will take any questions that you may have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Like Sean said, the reason we're here is to get rid of CSO 18. Oh, I'm lost. Oh, there it is. CSO 18 is located right here on the corner of 5th and Ramsdale. What happens now is that when flows get too high and come down the sanitary sewer to the plant, the operators partially close a gate at the plant to prevent all that flow going through the system. And when that happens, it backs up, comes back around all the way back to CSO 18, and the sanitary sewage mixes with the stormwater, and then comes down this storm pipe, goes across the Morton Salt property into Lake Manistee.
Let me make this red real quick.
Oh, make it red.
Nobody can see a white line on everything.
Well, this was working.
Then right click on there, right click. No, can't right click, because you gotta go back to it. Forget it, use the pointer,
All right.
okay?
So the first thing we had to look at with this project was actually getting the flow to the wastewater plant. Because the existing pipe right now is too short, or too small, and it cannot convey the flow to the plant, even if the plant could handle all that flow that was coming to it. So we looked at 3 alternatives for that. What is it on here?
Sorry, everybody.
Yeah, it's advancing on here now.
Nice.
Ron, you don't have the button on the,
I don't know.
It's not moving. Well, now.
That's nice.
Appreciate it, bud. There we go. Okay, like I was saying, we had to look at three alternatives to get the water to the plant. Alternative one was to install a new 36-inch sewer down Ramsdale Street and then down to the corner of 7th and Kosciuszko. After we would do that, we would line the existing interceptor sewer down 5th Street, down Kosciuszko to that same intersection. And where those two pipes combined, we would kick it into a 48-inch pipe, run it down 7th Street, and then go cross-country to the wastewater plant. After that, all that construction would be done. We would abandon the remainder of the existing interceptor sewer. The issues with this alternative is that Kosciuszko and 5th Street is a truck route for Morton Salt. And we'd have to disrupt that and send trucks down residential streets while we were doing the construction. Additionally, we'd have to have construction on 2 separate streets, actually 4 blocks. So a second alternative we looked at, alternative 2, was to replace the existing 36-inch sanitary sewer with a 48. So basically going from CSO 018 down Kosciuszko, down 7th Street, cross country to the wastewater plant, and then we would abandon the remainder of the existing interceptor sewer. Again, if we did this, we would have to disrupt the truck route. We'd have to run trucks through residential streets. The truck route road is actually thicker pavement, and it's cost more to rip that up and replace it. And actually Kosciuszko Street and 5th Street down that sewer route is in really good shape, so tearing it up didn't seem like a very good idea. So we looked at a third option. The third option was to run a 48-inch from CSO 18 down Ramsdale Street to 7th, cross country to the wastewater plant, and then abandon the entire 36-inch interceptor sewer from CSO 18 to the plant. This is actually the least costly option. Ramsdale Street and 7th Street are in pretty bad shape, so ripping up the sewer and putting new sewer in there and replacing the road is a good benefit for the city. Minimizes rerouting of trucks and detours. With all these options, this is a RD requirement that need to explain the environmental impacts, but all the projects would be in city right-of-ways. We'd use standard construction methods and soil erosion sedimentation controls to make sure we weren't impacting the environment. For these three alternatives, preliminary cost estimates are between $3 and $4 million. And again, alternative 3 is the cheapest one, sitting around $3 million. So our second issue we had, our second problem we have to fix is once we get that water to the plant, we got to treat it. So the alternative 1 that we looked at was a large concrete storage basin. This hatched area is actually a property that the city is in the process of purchasing right now, south of the plant, or west of the plant. This map north is to the left. Our new sewer would come in along these railroad tracks. We would rehab or replace 8th and Vine pump station. That would pump into that sewer, run to an overflow weir structure. The plant, when a high flow would come to the plant, the operators would work it the same way. They'd shut that gate partially shut, but instead of the flow backing up all the way to CSO 18, it'll overflow in this structure right here, which will have a screen on it. The overflow water will dump into this basin. When flows come back down to normal, the operators can move a valve in this box and bring back the additional flow as they see fit to be able to treat it. With all these, with each one of these treatment options, we had to design for the remedial storm according to MDEQ. But we know that eventually there's going to be a bigger storm than that that's going to hit the system and come down the pipe and end up in the basin. And that case when the basin cannot hold it all, we have secondary treatment that'll take the overflow water and treat it and send it to the lake. Pros with this option are it's a gravity feed option. We don't have to pump water into the basin. We can feed everything to the plant by gravity. And the plant operators can actually operate pretty much the same way they do now. They're not going to learn anything new. Cons with it, it's going to be very expensive to construct. This whole structure will have to be built on piles. There's poor soils and high water table out there. It'll be very difficult to clean. If you can imagine, this is like a 3-acre swimming pool sitting out there. So after every CSO event, they're gonna have to clean it. And you can imagine out there with a fire hose trying to clean off 3 acres of concrete. The other con with this is that you can't really expand the structure. I mean, this is it. There's no more room to build it any bigger. So we looked at a second option,
I'm sorry, whose property did you say that was on option 1?
the Hatch property.
Yeah, that one right there.
The city is currently purchasing that from Morton Salt.
Okay.
So treatment alternative 2 would be above ground storage tanks. Again, the sewer would come in along the railroad tracks. We could actually eliminate 8th and Vine pump station and run that flow by gravity to a manhole and run it into a new headworks facility that would have screening, grit removal, and pumping. Normal flows coming down that pipe that the treatment plant can handle would be pumped straight to the plant and treated like normal. Excess flows higher than what the plant can treat would be pumped to these storage tanks. And they would pump to the first tank, overflow to the next one, to the next one, to the next one. And once they're full or partially full and the flows reside coming down the pipe, the plant operators can bring that flow back into the system and treat it at the plant. And again, if we get a bigger storm than a remedial storm, there's an overflow on the last tank that'll be treated by UV disinfection and sent to the lake. Good points about this option is we'll have increased screening and grit removal facilities at the wastewater plant. The plant, actually, when sewer comes into the plant right now, they pump it at a pump station right here. New pumps will be installed in this facility, so we'll have brand new pumps pump into the wastewater plant. This option is a lot easier to construct. It's all above grade, or most of it is above grade. It's least cost alternative, and it can be expanded in the future. So if something goes haywire with the sewer system, you can always just keep adding tanks onto this thing and keep operating the same way. Some cons of this option is that you have to pump everything that comes down that pipe. So you're gonna have extra electrical costs for pumping the water. And we looked at quite a few other alternatives. We looked at high rate clarifiers, high rate filters, utilizing the Morton Salt property north of CSO 18, pumping it to barges and sending it to Canada and let them worry about it. But most of those were shot down. They were either too costly or not really ethical, I guess. But again, all this would be built to normal construction standards. We'd use soil erosion sedimentation controls to ensure that the environment wasn't getting harmed. And between these two options that we have today, the cost guess right now is between 8.5 and 11 million, added on to the other 3 to 4 I was talking about earlier. And that's where I end.
Which option is, what is the, I mean, you didn't break down the price per option on those two options.
I didn't. The tanks, the above ground tanks is the cheaper option right now. I mean, I'm in the process of getting these cost estimates around. We just started doing the application for this phase. but it's around, that one is around 8 to 8.5 million
Okay.
so far.
I'm trying to visualize where I might have seen some above-ground holding tanks, up by Beulah or Frankfurt. Does that plant have above-ground?
I don't think
You know?
I've seen that plant. The tanks will kind of look like a farm silo, only a lot bigger round and no top on it. It won't have a dome on top of it.
Is there odor from those, or,
That water will be mainly stormwater, and it shouldn't be sitting in that tank very long. As soon as the storm event is gone and flows go back to normal, the plant should start bringing that water back through the system. So it shouldn't be sitting in there very long to collect odors. And you'll wash it down too. Yeah, they'll clean those tanks every time there's a event is over too.
so which one are you recommending, Sean? Are you recommending one over the other, or?
So right now, what's really important to realize is we are very early in this stage. We have till June to get our basis of design, but at the same time, we have to submit this rural development application, and so we're definitely leaning towards above-ground tanks. The last option he showed there. We had looked initially at the in-ground tanks, because operationally it's nice, it's all by gravity. We don't have to have a lot of additional pumping down there. But with the high groundwater table, we literally have to put a huge coffer dam in, de-water, all that material, it's got some salts in it. And because it's Morton property, that's gotta be stored. And everything just, anytime we dig into the ground there, it gets very expensive. This option allows us to get up above grade for the most part, and put these tanks up. And
Correct me if I'm wrong, but above-ground tanks, you said you could add to them.
correct.
So it allows, as the city grows, that might grow, and you can add to it as you would go. So it would be easier than just building a big pond, or better than building a big pond.
Yes, right, it gives us more flexibility. And we're literally negotiating with the DEQ on how many and how big those are, because that, every gallon costs something, and so, ideally, we could try and get, if we really, things went well, it could get smaller. And, or as we remove I&I in the system over years and years to come, there may be other uses for it. It could be used for temporary storage while we work on the plant. But there's a lot more flexibility with the above ground tanks for expansion as well, so. And I guess just to close out quickly, because I know, so RD application phase 1 is basically submitted and finished with the USD rural development. They're looking, it's going to the federal level very, very soon, and so it'll be getting reviewed at the federal level for loans. RD application phase 2, the tanks, is kind of in the beginning stages. We're getting our estimates. We have to do environmental assessments, and so that is happening right now. We're working with the DEQ to figure out how big they have to be. So there's a lot of things on RD application 2 that are happening in parallel. We're looking at purchasing that property. All these things are kind of in sync. And so as we get to the end of that and we come together, we'll converge on that answer, and then that'll go on our basis of design, and it'll go on our rural development application. We're looking probably at submitting that application in May if all those moons align. And then we'll have both applications in for the funding of those projects. The remaining items on that list there are basically our corrective action plan deadlines. So we'll be working towards the basis of design as our next critical deadline.
So I ask this question every time you come up and talk. How are we doing on the deadlines?
So we've met, as I mentioned earlier, we've had 2 so far. We've met both of those. We met them in a short period of time, turned around, submitted, and then like I mentioned, the DEQ literally took on one 3 months to respond with an answer, 2 to 3 months, and 6 months with a written answer. On the one we just submitted in January of this year, I talked to the DEQ yesterday, and they say they have comments, they have notes, and they're working on getting them to me.
Oh, wow.
So it's a very frustrating process because we need these answers to get to that next deadline. And so what we're going to do is we're trying to implement frequent calls. We're going to set up meetings and conference calls. I've got a call with their CSO specialist down in Southeast Michigan, and we're going to talk about the sizing of the basin and different things even before they get it in writing, because I need to know, and we need to kind of just be working together to come to the answer before it's in writing, because I'll run out of time. We'll run out of time to do this design, if we don't know some of these answers. So we're doing everything in our power, but it's not, we're at the whim of them.
And I've asked Sean to just continually engage the DEQ and push them to get us some comments, because I don't want it to be turned around that the city was the one that was late in getting information there. We've met all of our timelines. We just want to make sure that the DEQ gives us adequate feedback in a timely fashion. So we have all that documented in case it becomes an issue sometime in the future.
I'm guessing we're not the only community that has CSO issues.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
Any questions or comments? Thank you very much, Sean and crew. Next item, D, discussion of medical marijuana provisioning center. Mr. Taylor.
Yes, as council's aware, staff's been working with two groups that have expressed interest in medical marijuana operations in the city. And throughout it, they've always expressed interest in provisioning center, and I cautioned them that we needed to get some things done before we could have that conversation. So tonight's the night that we have set aside to have that conversation. We have one group represented here, Bo Parmentier and his group that bought the industrial lots, the 2 industrial lots in the north end of town. Unfortunately, there was a scheduling conflict, and Ken Armour and his group could not be here tonight. The intent was to be here. So what we're going to present to council is we have a staff presentation talking about what, if council was interested in provisioning operations, what that would entail, the process, where staff would recommend council locate those, and those types of things. And then we're going to take the opportunity to let Bo and his group just update you on where they are in their process in the medical marijuana growing and the other permits that they're looking from the city, and then talk about their experiences with provisioning centers. So we'll start off with Denise, and she'll make a presentation to council about the steps that we would need to follow if council so desired provisioning centers.
Yeah, as Sean, as Thad mentioned, I just want to walk through what steps council would have to take and what the process would be. Okay, first of all, we had developed a codified ordinance that developed standards for medical marijuana facilities for grow, transport, safety compliance, and processing. We do not have any language in place for a provisioning center. So what would happen is the city attorney would have to draft an ordinance amendment to address provisioning standards and establish the number of permits. And that would also result in the development of another application form. Now for the zoning, that end would go to the Planning Commission. I've used the MSU standards that I had used previously for developing our zoning language that's in place. They also had standards for provisioning centers. So using that language is where we would create a definition. We would, of course, have to select a district it would go into. Our staff discussion was that the C1 Regional Commercial District would probably be the best location. And then, of course, actually develop the special use permit standards. We would define a provisioning center. And then the district that we had looked at is the C1 Regional Commercial District, and it would require Key Street frontage, and that's also access from a Key Street frontage, and I'll hit on the reason for that. C1 is actually that commercial district that is west of US 31, north of the North Side Bar, and also the area down by Manistee Catholic Central School. And Arthur Street is a Key Street frontage. And then we have the school. And provisioning centers cannot be located within 300 feet of property used for a public or private elementary vocational secondary school would be included in our language. So in that they also have to be, that would knock out these 3 parcels, and they would also not be able to be they have to be accessed from a Key Street segment. We all know the topography of that area. You actually use the old Cypress Street to access that area. So it would knock out the area where the car wash is. So we could add a marijuana provisioning center with Key Street frontage on that section in pink that's shown right here along the US 31 corridor. Our regulations and conditions would also follow the same regulations and conditions as the other standards. That is, they have to comply with the state requirements. They also have to comply with our Chapter 866. And that's the language that George would develop. So they have those same regulations as a grower, processor, safety compliance facility, or secure transporter. And the language within the zoning ordinance would address hours, indoor activities, other activities, non-conforming uses, the physical appearance. We would also have odor controls. They have to front on and be accessed by a Key Street segment, parking, lighting, signs, landscaping. And there's that buffer zone, and it can't be located within 300 feet of public-private schools, college, university, licensed child care center, preschool, public playground, public swimming pool, public or private use activity facility, or library. And so the actual process would be that City Council would direct staff to move forward with developing ordinance language. And that first language be developed by the city attorney that would address Chapter 866, which would require 2 readings by City Council, also provides 2 opportunities for public input. After that ordinance would go in effect, we would have to draft zoning ordinance language that requires a public hearing by the Planning Commission. Also, public comments, a component of every public hearing before the Planning Commission. If it's approved, then it would also require 2 readings by City Council, an additional 2 opportunities for public input. So altogether, we would have a total of 5 opportunities for public input at either the City Council or Planning Commission level before provisioning centers could be allowed in the community. So any questions about the process?
So the only district would be north side.
That is what we had discussed at staff level. Because of the access from US 31, it's very highly visible. So there wouldn't be people going through, like in the Peninsula District, which is more of a neighborhood community, or if it was in either of the industrial districts, you have to go through more neighborhood areas to get to it.
The buffer, is that state regulation?
That is the recommended language I had from my document from MSU.
Because Mayor Pro Tem and myself, as we visited Provisioning Center in Detroit, there was a party store adjoining it. There was a small vacant lot, and there was a daycare center on the other side of it. It was certainly within 300 feet.
Mm-hmm. That is the language that we had tailored from the recommended language that was provided by MSU.
Certainly all those are up for discussion. Those are just some guidelines that Denise had gleaned from MSU.
I feel like I need to just restate my opinion that I stated months ago. I'm not interested in a provisioning center. I'm certainly not interested in one, unfortunately, in the north side, since I represent a great deal of the north side. Nor do I feel that we have done our own due diligence to kind of look at both sides of this equation. We need to look at what's called the unintended consequences. I've spent a great deal of time on the phone talking to Andrew Ambrose at Michigan State Police, talking about statistical information. I really do think that there's not going to be a shortage of provisioning centers throughout the state once recreational marijuana is approved, which is likely to happen in November. If you look at Colorado, in 2014, they had 147 dispensaries or provisioning centers, and it's grown by 300% or more to 2018. There's just a number of issues that I think the public needs to look at, and I think it is our responsibility as city council people to recognize that there's 2 sides to every issue. There's nothing that protects our community from somebody who's got a medical marijuana license to go in and make a buy at a provisioning center and then turn around and sell it on the street in our city to our children, to our people. And that's a huge statistical problem that's occurring in a lot of other places in this country. And we need to be acutely aware of that, and we need to have the public engaged in conversation about this.
And I think that's the exact reason that we had included in Denise's PowerPoint, that there, you know, if council wanted to move in this direction, there were a minimum of 5 opportunities for the community to offer their input. And also, if council wants to move forward, they could have a special meeting just to talk about it.
And I would strongly advise, first of all, I don't have a problem restating my same position that I had months ago on this topic. I have not changed my opinion. I make many trips to Arizona. I see provisioning centers. I see what it does. I'm just not, I don't want a marijuana mile in the city, because once you put in a provisioning center, you're going to get a lot of other stores that's selling paraphernalia, and it's all I have to do is look at the track record in Colorado and see what's happening. And I would really appreciate it if we would be thoughtful about this and look at the other side and the consequences of having a provisioning center in the city of Manistee. And I really, at this point, because this has come up, I didn't think I would be here to say this, but I really do want Mr. Ambrose to come and speak to us, the whole council.
And that's fine if council would like him to come.
I just have a question for Denise. We can limit the number of provisioning centers.
Yes.
I have somewhat of a different take than Councilmember Beaton. It's not a different take. I don't have the concerns of a provisioning center. I have a concern of the number and where they're located. I have more concerns over bars and people leaving under the influence and driving when they're impaired. I say that if I was to PBT, half of the people that came out of the bar, or over half of the people, shouldn't be driving. At a provisioning center, you're not going to be smoking the product. You're not going to be using it. You're going to buy it and you're going to leave. It's not a place to hang out and socialize and drink or and partake of the product. The other thing that I see is we have provisioning centers all over town, whether we are all over the county, whether we like it or not. We have 101 of them. We have people who have medical marijuana cards. It's not really a provisioning center, but in my mind, it's like a provisioning center. They can grow their own. So it is here. If we don't have a provisioning center, will Filer Township have one? Will Manistee Township have one? And are we missing out on anything? These are some of the things that go through my mind. It's going to be here. Are we missing an opportunity to have people employed again? And for me, this is still a thought process. I'm still going through it. And I'll restate, bars sometimes scare me more than a provisioning center would. I see people leaving establishments where there's drinking on site that I really question whether they should be driving a vehicle or not. You can't go in there and have 4 or 5 beers and tell me you should be driving it on the road. I think our police chief should be out there PBPing everybody that leaves so that we're all safe. I'm just kidding. But it's a reality.
I appreciate your comments, I really do, and that is a serious problem. But it's a more serious problem when I look at these other states and there's statistical information about people coming into them and buying marijuana, and they're selling it illegally, and they're selling it to minors. I have the bigger issue with that, although I totally respect your opinion on the drinking. But there is a bigger issue. We haven't looked at it. We haven't figured out the impact it would have in our city.
This was just to detail out the process for you, and thought that if there was something council wanted to move forward with, to give you the information to make your decision from.
I have been out of law enforcement for over 20 years now. And even back then, we were arresting marijuana users on a weekly basis. Every weekend when they come up to go to our ORV trails or to our snowmobile trails, we were arresting marijuana. I have a keen I can smell marijuana if somebody's been smoking it. And there are places that I've went into, like Myers, I can go to the person who's been smoking marijuana and smell it. I mean, on their clothes, if it's fresh, you can smell it. I know that it's here. I'm just struggling with a lot of the logistics of it. I'm really not against it at this point.
I got a question. We had the distributing center or distribution center,
Provisioning center, yep.
okay? And if the recreational marijuana passes, from what I understand, and that's what I'm asking you to, or somebody to answer, the taxes from medical marijuana, once it becomes recreational, we would not be able to collect those taxes anymore. Yes or no?
I don't know the answer to that.
I need those answers.
Yeah, okay.
Because you know how I feel about it. I have no desire whatsoever to have a provisioning center in my city.
My-
None.
Yeah, my sense is that if the state has the framework set up through medical marijuana to tax, my gut tells me that they would do the same thing for recreational marijuana because they're not gonna pass up a revenue stream. That's my guess, but I don't know.
What
And
about
I don't even know if, I can ask that. I don't know if they've even considered their answer yet.
I
because
believe
we
it's
don't
60
know.
days after, once medical marijuana, if recreational, the taxes are null and void. And we will not be able to collect taxes on that.
I can pose the question.
Well, it needs to be.
I've got a number of issues. I mean, you hear concerns all the time, and I don't diminish Councilmember Beaton's concerns at all. As a matter of fact, when we spoke over at the Council on Aging last Wednesday, we heard some of the same concerns. It's going to attract undesirable people to the community. I think if people think back when the prison came to Manistee, the same drumbeat was heard on that. It's going to bring prison families and prisoners are going to hang around, and it's just going to degrade the community and cause all these problems. We went down several months ago and by invitation and visited a distribution center and a caregiver growing facility. Been in operation for about 4 years down in Detroit. Had one attempt at break-in. You go up, you go through the front door, which is a big steel door. When it's closed, it's locked. But you go in through that first door, there's a camera. You push a button, identify yourself. They let you into a reception area. You show them your card. You fill out some paperwork. You sit and wait until the purchasing room is open. It's one person at a time for people's privacy. You got another steel door to go through and cameras everywhere. They had one attempted break-in in 4 years. One person got through one door before the sirens started going off and people came in there. But in reality, the party store people and the daycare people welcome the provisioning center because police frequent the area a little more often, and it is in a visible key street area, so it's not like it's isolated or anything. It was neat and clean, and I'll say it again, never used it, didn't ever touch a plant until I went down there and was in the growing place, and I said, well, reach out and touch one of these buds and see if I'm electrocuted or something. But it's just like the concerns we heard the other day. Well, people be hanging around the facilities if you're growing marijuana. Well, you can't get high smelling it through the wall because unless you heat it or it's processed and cooked in a product or developed into a product, there's no THC released, so it's just a growing plant. As I explained down there, you could clip some off and eat it and maybe get a stomach ache from it, but you're not going to get high by eating the plant. It's legal in the state of Michigan, and when the state declares something a legal process, I take notice of that and put my personal opinion aside. It is my responsibility to uphold and conform to the law. The state of Michigan issues license under some very stringent criterias. and I'm fairly satisfied with that. I think, you know, in the beginning, we clearly identified that provisioning centers were not on the table, and we had developers approach us that clearly understood that. Now we've had a request to revisit the issue. My take on this is that I'm willing to revisit the issue and do some more study, and as Mr. Taylor suggested, even have a special session dedicated to nothing but that issue, and have some robust dialogue. The first thing I want to see from the developers is I want to see some plans, and I want to see some action through planning and zoning, and I want to see some movement, because we've taken the initiative, we've got a police ordinance, we've got zoning in place. We've done everything we were asked to do to accommodate the process. Now it's time for someone else to take a step and show us that they're applying for licenses, that they're working on the zoning. We have 2 industrial lots purchased. I commend that. We still have purchase offer for the ironworks going. I mean, we're kind of sitting in limbo, waiting to see when the next move is and what's going on to move forward. I'm not. I would share the Mayor Pro Tem's concern. I'm probably more concerned. You know, Wesco just got a license to sell packaged alcohol. You know, people don't go in there and open a bottle and drink it in the store. It's against the law for them to go out and sit in their car and drink it, but I'm sure some people do. We have 101 medical marijuana cardholders in the county of Manistee. Each of those is entitled to grow 12 of their own plants. And for all purposes, they can be giving it to their neighbors or sell it on the street. If it becomes recreational, I don't have any idea what the future will hold for that. But I do know that next week when we're at the Capitol Conference, I've already arranged for State Senator Boer and Representative Vanderwall to meet us at the legislative breakfast. And we're certain to bring that issue up. I've spoke to both of them about the lack of a proactive legislature with this coming. They know it's coming, and they know the statistics. They know the 62 to 68% favorable rate on surveys with the voters. And you know, it's like, why are you not moving forward, trying to put some framework together and give some guidance to people in preparation of it? You know, why wait to the last minute? Why wait until what happened in Detroit, where the voters put it on an initiative issue in last November's election and bypassed city council in their entirety for provisioning centers and the rules and regulations, to the point that if an applicant meets the background check and qualifies for a state license, they can, consistent with zoning, opening a provisioning center down there. No public hearings, no city council approval. And you know, I'd hate to see us sit back and get into a similar situation. I suggested to Representative Vanderwall that if you want referendum to make the decision for you as opposed to legislature, I said just keep sitting on your hands. People need to recognize what the public is leaning towards, and in some form prepare for that. And I'm not saying yes, I'm for a provisioning center. I'm saying yes, I'm willing to have a dialogue on it.
Okay. And that's where I'm coming from too, is having that dialogue. I'm just thinking out loud is, if Manistee decides, or the public decides, the taxpayer decides they don't want that provisioning center, that doesn't mean it won't go in Filer or Manistee Township. And it probably will be a provisioning center close by. Do I want to, and again, I'm thinking out loud, do I want to be in a position where I maintain some control over that distribution and how it's done? Or do I want to let somebody else do it and have no control? Because I will have no control over it if it goes to Manistee. And again, I'm thinking out loud. These are just things to flip around.
I'm just letting you,
Yeah.
I'm just listening.
Yeah. I just kind of
I want to give you the respect that you're just listening.
Yeah, just kind of flipping around in my head. You know, do we want control? Can we maintain control? Or do we want somebody else to have control? Because the bottom line is, as long as it's legal, it'll go someplace. It's going to go.
Manistee Township opted out by a vote of their legislative body. It wasn't necessary by state law, such as we've done. You have to pass an ordinance to allow it, to have it in a community. The lack of an ordinance does not allow a growing or a processing or anything else, but they made their statement by actually making a resolution to prohibit in Manistee Township, so.
But
I would feel so much more comfortable if we were fair to the public and brought in Mr. Ambrose to speak to us about the other side that we need to be aware of, to make a thoughtful decision on this before we pull the trigger on it.
If that's
That's my
council's
opinion,
wish.
and I would hope that the council would understand the necessity of that.
But I'm sorry, Councilman Beaton. I have no problem with bringing someone in. I think the more information that we can get, the better. I think we need to hear both sides of the story. I have absolutely no problem with that at all.
I agree, to hear both sides. I'm just, and also agree with, Smith, that I just wanna get the discussion out there and get the options out there. I'm not necessarily saying, yes, I want this, and no, I don't want this, but we all need to be open and see what would happen as a if situation right now.
The bottom line is, what is the taxpayer willing to support? What are they willing to support and willing to go along with? And that's what we need to know, and by having that dialogue, I think we'll find out.
I have a question for my fellow council people. It seemed like we were all in agreement on this months ago, that we're not interested in a provisioning center. For those of you who have changed your mind, can you give me some reason as to why you've done that?
Well, I haven't changed my mind. I'm just going through a thought process and trying to weigh both sides. And the fact that there was a request, and there's a request, so it comes before council, and I'm going to take a look at both sides of the issue and hear what the people have to say, and that's how I'm gonna make my decision.
Well, that's good, because that way we can hear the other side too, from the law enforcement side, from the head guy at State
And I
Michigan
think
State
I just
Police.
suggested that we have that person come in and talk.
Absolutely.
That you suggested. I just made that suggestion to Mr. Taylor. And I think he nodded his head, and I think that means a yes. You'll try.
Yeah, I said if that's council's pleasure, we can have them,
Yeah.
Yep.
have other people.
I think we need it. I think we owe the public that.
Well, let me say something. I've arrested people for 50 years now. I still arrest them every day, and I'm concerned about what is in their blood after they smoke it and they go drive. Traverse City's got 2 cases, and I wanna know what the results are of those cases, because they're having a big problem with it. So I wanna see what the decisions are up there with the courts. Because I think that, I've gotta look at the police point of it. But what we're gonna have for accidents and suing people. What are we gonna get sued for?
In your opinion, in your law enforcement experience, Mr. Kowalski, whether we had a provisioning center or not, make a difference if they could buy it in a different, if they could go to the township and buy it, or drive to Ludington and buy it, would it make a difference in what happened here? Would people still go to Ludington and buy it, and it would still be here?
Well, they're buying it anyway.
Right, okay, that's, yeah.
Well, and that might solve okay. For example, if they're going to populate in other areas that are close to here, would that maybe satisfy the developers who are interested in the properties already in the city that they've made an investment in?
I can't speak for the developers.
I know, I'm throwing that out there, hoping that.
Well, and Bo's gonna address council, after, at some point tonight. I don't know, in discussions with Ken Armour, his concern is a legitimate business concern, is that, he's watching the landscape across the state, and a lot of communities are in the same position that Manistee is in right now, that they'll allow all the permits or licenses except provisioning. So what he's looking at is there's potentially gonna be a glut of product and not enough outlets. So he's just looking at it from that standpoint. The other thing being is that added transportation costs from the point of origin to sale. So that's what he's looking at, he and his group. And I think I think it's safe to say that Bo would have a similar position. But that's just what I'm hearing from the developer.
Well, if you wanna know, I've taken suitcases away from people with the stuff in,
Taking what?
suitcases, all of the stuff.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Bringing it in whether you like it or not.
It's here. So anyhow, before we ask Bo to come up and talk, I just, like I said, Ken Armour, the point person for the group that's interested in the Ironworks building, he was going to be here tonight and he had a scheduling conflict. But we've been in conversations with him since Friday and over the weekend, and he is moving forward. We've had discussions again today on the process that he has to undertake to move forward with a special use permit. He's been doing some of that. He's gonna ramp it up. He's got his architect and engineer working on that, so that's in the process. I know he has still has that agreement in place on that property, so he is moving forward. We also suggested that while he is doing his special use permit work, he ought to be looking at our applications and working on those concurrently, so that once he gets, if he gets a special use permit, then he'll have that ready to, it'll be a seamless transition to make the application. So he's moving forward, and I'll let Bo speak for himself.
Okay.
He's good at that. Bo, you wanna
Okay,
come
Bo,
up?
the floor is yours.
Jim will go over the slideshow, so I'll let him handle that. He's an excellent speaker. I just want to thank everybody for your time and allowing me the pleasure to come up here and speak. It's always a pleasure to be up here. You guys are very alert and very active to everything that's going on, and always have an open vision on any possibilities. One of the things I wanted to discuss is our team's strictly for the medicine aspect. Everything's going to be all organic, so we'll extract it to where it's just CBD, pull the THC out of it. We've got PhDs on staff, a couple of them, and we're just going after the top end, high quality medicine. We won't have something that people can smoke. If they're taking it to sell it on the street, they're selling it to somebody with cancer. Or somebody that's having seizures. We're going after just that niche market of it. And you'll see that in the slideshow once you start seeing what our team consists of. And everybody's going to have their own market. This is the market that we chose to go after for our company, just the top end, best of the best market on that. There's a lot to take into factor on it. There's different receptors that they receive the CBD oil through in the body, and that depends on the strain of how it's grown. So our scientists will be able to determine all that and play that into the role. Mike can probably explain that a lot better than I can as well. Obviously, you guys all know I'm the developer, but I'm learning as I go, and of course, the expense of this is going to be very out of hand for somebody to want to buy if they were going to try to use it for something else, which I don't even know what they would use it for, but obviously they're going to try to find somebody that's getting it from a caregiver or something if they're trying to get it on the street outside of it for our center anyways. But with your talk of possibly having a provisioning center, one thought, since we're just doing medicine, ours would be a lot smaller niche. If it's something you guys were considering, to have one in our facility there, because of course the security and everything's already going to be addressed at that point. You're going to have a secure place with just the strictly medicine and nobody coming for the recreational. You're going to have very limited traffic or anything to that. One of the things that the transport on it, so far the markets and all the other states are relating to about $300 a pound for transport. So anything over 10 miles. So that's something that probably the other group is learning and addressing, and that's probably why they came back to you and asked about this, is because they're probably learning about that at this point. I can answer any questions you got, or I can have Jim do a slideshow and then go through questions after that, because he might answer a bunch of them throughout that.
Quick question on transport.
Yep.
Is it $300 a pound to transport?
Per pound over 10 miles.
And is that because of the state law and the security that's required and the documentation that's required to?
Yep.
That's what keeps the cost up?
And because so many of them aren't doing it. Then one other thing off that subject that you guys did bring up is obviously we haven't started work out there yet. Nobody has on any of these places, even though you guys were so diligent on getting the paperwork done and everything in a timely manner. We had another project that before the ordinance went in place that we were working on already, that we're just finalizing the last steps in, and that'll all be done on the 27th of this month. So
Where is that?
That's in Chesaning. I've done 2 of them in Chesaning. This is the second one. That one consists of a 75,000 plant license facility, 1,500 plant count at my industrial property there. So that was in the process since, probably 3 or 4 months before this started here. So of course I was gonna naturally get that one finished before I start another one. You'll see in the slideshow, we've got a bunch done on this, getting ready for the special use permit and our application. We've got drawings already done. We've got most of the layout done and the building blueprints. A lot of that's already rolled up, so it's still moving forward, but obviously with winter and another project going on, not always the quickest thing, but it is moving forward behind the scenes as well. So
I just for my own clarification, I'm curious, was it, when you were here before and you were making your pitch about the two lots that you wanted to purchase, that you were successful actually at purchasing from the city,
Yep.
you didn't seem to indicate, in fact, I think when you said that you didn't need a provisioning center. And was that, now did that I guess I'm curious, this $300 per pound for shipping, was that a new law that all of a sudden popped up after you made the purchase, or I'm just wondering at what point that became
I didn't,
issue.
and I still don't. But obviously it is another source of revenue. It is something that I don't think, obviously, what those buildings would produce would sell here. I don't think there'd be a market for it, so some of it would be shipped out no matter what, naturally. It takes more product to produce the oil, of course. That's why the oil's more expensive, and when you're making a fine grade medicine, you do more extraction. Similar to if you're making racing fuel or gasoline, the finer the product, the more extraction to get it more pure. So I just learned of
Well, what kind of patients would be buying the product?
ones that have cancer, seizures, any of the problems that the CBD will treat.
Is chronic pain one of them?
There's a lot of them.
Well, because I know 90%
Arthritis.
I know 90% of the cardholders that's their ailment. It's chronic pain. It's not the cancer. It's not the other things.
Yeah, I mean, we're specializing, most of our team's specializing in a lot of the cancer and seizure aspects of it because of personal and family ties that they've had to losing a family member to cancer. As a matter of fact, one of our head growers in Chesaning, he lost his mother-in-law to his mother to brain cancer, and he believes she'd still be here if that would have been available at the time.
Are you able to make that distinction? I mean, if you're a medical marijuana card holder and your card is for chronic pain, which from my understanding is not hard to get, how does that differ from the other high end, and do you make that distinction when you're selling it?
We don't, but I mean, for chronic pain, they're really not going to get a lot from us. I mean, they're going to be going after the people with the high THC, and we're going for the CBD. So
Okay,
we're going after a
that's
totally
important.
different market. If you got high pain and you're coming to us, we're really not going to be able to benefit you a lot. The CBD does control a lot of that stuff because it controls a lot for chronic headaches, and I've actually got a study here that I could share with you that you could look at. This was a doctor. Would you explain this? Mm-hmm. You could probably explain this better than I could.
Right into that.
Okay, he can explain about this, but this is a doctor from U of M that had chronic headaches, and nobody there could figure it out. But I'll let him explain. Do you want to see this? You could glance through this while he explains it.
Sure.
And I'll let Jim jump up here, and then if you have questions for either of us
Just one
at that point.
clarification.
Yep.
Your product, there will be no THC, no hallucination drug involved in the product that you are going to be producing?
Will it be 100% free, or I know we're gonna have very low, if none at all.
Yeah, very, very low THC in most of these products. There are synergistic and antagonistic effects that we can get from combining different, both sourced from cannabis and from other plant sources, combined with the CBD to get different effects for different elements. So, essentially, even the CBD products that you can go on Amazon right now and have shipped to your house.
Yes, you
they
can.
tell you there's absolutely 0% THC in it.
Right, you can buy it online. Yep.
Guys, why don't I, if you will, give them a little idea of who we are, what we've assembled, and how all your very good questions may partially be answered tonight, and where we are in wrestling with these same questions that you've raised with the wisdom of your counsel.
Yep, I'll let Jim take over. Just one quick thing, I decided to clarify this on my part. There's 20 different CBDs with 10 different receptors in your body. So that's what we're specializing in, is the different CBDs and what medicine they cure, and so that we can get the proper medicine for what the ailment is.
All I know is that I can go on Amazon and have it delivered to my door. It'll be there tomorrow morning if I order it tonight. That's pretty fast service.
Yep.
And what Bo has in the sheet is quite unique, so if I can use that as a segue, yeah, and I'll explain. And to our folks over here, can you give me a quick orientation to your clicker? I've used different ones in different locations. So if you just introduce yourself. Forward, backward. Okay.
If you could just introduce yourself.
So, thank you for the podium, ladies and gentlemen of the council and those in attendance tonight. I am one of 20 people that represents what you see on your screens, this Plant Life group. And Bo certainly has been up here before and has been telling me of all the neat things going on up here in Manistee, and I was able to join him tonight. So I want to give you a little bit about my background. My name is Jim Folds. Grew up in Saginaw County, and I aspired to be an entrepreneur at the age of 9. All right, I'm cutting grass for my parents. My neighbors notice the nice job I'm doing and say, "Hey, can we hire you to do our grass?" Now, I grew up in a household where my father was a CPA and my mother was a secretary for another CPA firm. So I learned very early on that there's certain costs in cutting that grass. You've got to have a lawnmower, there's gas to buy, and so on. From 9 years old to 62 years old today, I never thought that in my career path, which includes being an Eagle Scout, governor of Wolverine Boy State, top student in my class, captain of the swim team, going on to Central Michigan University, turning down scholarships at U of M and Michigan State, that graduating from CMU in 3 years, and then embracing a career as a young CPA in accounting, that I would do some of the things I've done, or yet alone be here tonight. But why am I here tonight? Because a common thread weaves through my life and what we can do with this industry and the team that we've assembled. And that young CPA I just mentioned went on to be one of the early Little Caesar pizza franchises. So I've been a pawn on the chessboards of 3 different billionaires in the last 40 years. I've watched them build their organizations. I've watched how they've addressed issues, Linda, not dissimilar to what you've brought up tonight. Very good, heart questions. But these billionaires have had to tackle that. So I leave my Little Caesars. And by the way, I had to leave the state of Michigan, and I took the Tampa Bay market. So as different developers are coming to you and trying to determine how are they going to develop this market, or how are they going to embrace the Medical Marijuana Facilities Act of 2017 and apply those 5 different licensing processes, one of which your board is seriously debating tonight, this provision center, and how do these things work together. I think the Plant Life Group and what you're about to learn has some answers to that. And I want to also say that that career path, while I learned a lot from the Illich family and a lot about how to develop something from infancy to a 32-store chain in the Tampa Bay area from 1982 to 1996, I hung up those apron strings, came back to Michigan, bought an industrial company that, as a young CPA, I had involvement with, and my dad and some partners of his had taken over. And today that company is a 65-year-old company operating in a very small niche market. And I'm on the chessboard of a guy named Warren Buffett in this particular case. He owns the largest carbide tool company in the world in Tel Aviv, Israel. And Warren has the #1 distributor in the world for his product in Bridgeport, Michigan. The same gentleman I have is the #1 distributor for my carbide tool business out of Saginaw, Michigan in Bridgeport, a company called I1 Tool. So how does this little pawn, Jim Folds, having been a, if you will, a pawn on the chessboard of a Michael Illich, an Alec Gore, the top equity guy in the country, now operating out of Beverly Hills. His brother, by the way, Tom, owns the Detroit Pistons. Four Winds Boat was one of his acquisitions from John Wynn. And these are circles that I've observed. How did these guys do these things? And if you're a pawn on a chessboard of a billionaire, you've had some success yourself. So the philosophy of our group is, how does success breed success? And if you're going to pioneer something as new as the Medical Marijuana Facilities Act of 2017, which is by far cry leaps and bounds above the 2008 laws that have been discussed somewhat in the discussions here of how these grows are going and how people can have the grows within their home up to 12 plants, or a caregiver can do 72 plants. We have this huge shift going on in how all this is going to be done. With the successes I've just shared with you, my alumni at CMU asked me to join an entrepreneurial advisory board in 2003. And I'm telling you all this because it plays into what I've orchestrated here. I sat on that board from 2003 to 2011, and during that time helped pioneer one of the top entrepreneur programs in the state at Central Michigan University to be one of the top 20 in the United States. And I had very talented colleagues like me helping advise and take that program in a certain direction. They then twisted my arm. They didn't have to twist too hard. I wanted to do this. I started teaching, and I helped pioneer a program that I taught at the 101 level, and then also helped develop a 495 class, our capstone class. And why I tell you this is because during that time, we also created one of the largest competitions for young entrepreneurs called the New Venture Competition. And we award $80,000 in prize money so young entrepreneurs can go start a business of their own. The business plan you're about to see is based on the teachings at CMU, and it's an award-winning plan. And those teachings come as far from Harvard and some of their teachings, because we embrace a thing called the business model canvas. Now, with all that said, quite a bit to digest in this short period of time, I'm assuming. Hopefully I got your attention, because the plan you're about to see says, okay, we established this group in 2015. And based on those laws I've mentioned that existed in this state since 2008, this was the forward, wasn't it, right here?
No, this one right here.
Okay. Well, geez, after all those things, you can't, I can't even operate a little clicker properly, but here we go. We assembled this group of 20 different talented individuals. Myself, a CPA. One of my colleagues is a engineer, graduate of U of M. So when issues like quality control, air control, water, environment control come into play, Mike Fox and his team had to do these things in Midland, Michigan for Dow Chemical Company as they built laboratories and as they built their research facilities. One of my other colleagues is in the circle, and if I can come over here just a little bit, his name is Curtis White. Because you have these nice high-tech monitors in front of you, council members, I think you can see those things. But he has a PhD in microbiology and chemistry combined. He has 50 patents to his title and has written over 200 articles on different things. But he's an expert in odor elimination, an issue that came up earlier in your conversations, and quite frankly comes up in every community in every county in this state where decisions like those you're trying to make are being discussed. So this team actually was assembled as a supporting cast to the industry that we're talking about. And because of our multi-talented people, a contractor developer like Bo, a former mayor and a lobbyist in Lansing in Pat Doyle, a security and IT expert as in Walter Holm, this list has expanded and grown, and every day new spots in that circle are filling in. For example, 2 weeks ago I made a presentation using this same slide deck to a gentleman who had both an illustrious political career here in the state of Michigan and then went on to represent the state of Michigan in the Congress in Washington, D.C., Jim Barsha. Bo mentioned that many people in our group have had people, loved ones in their immediate family circle suffering from different things, including cancer. And Jim Barsha, unfortunately, has been fighting a private battle with his wife because she's dying of cancer. And she uses, Linda, not only the CBD side of things, but this pain management you brought up. In her particular case, yes, it's replaced much more harsher drugs in alleviating some of the pain that she's going through. So sometimes there is a combination of how these products from the cannabis plant may be used. But this team was assembled initially to help other groups. As a CPA, that's how I made a living in the early days, consulting and doing business advisory type work. As laws change, as they certainly have here in the state of Michigan, as those same laws are being embraced here in Manistee and within Manistee County, we have to adapt. You have to ask those questions that you've already brought up tonight, and you demand certain answers. And Chip, you're right, you need to get those answers. So in some cases, our group had that expertise to come in and advise communities on some of these things. And we watched some of these groups say they were going to do this and say they were going to do that, only to go back to those communities, maybe get approved, and then say, hey, we don't need you anymore. Well, we thought we were going to be there to help you with some of these issues. So in Chesting, we watched some of that start to take place, and a few months ago said, why don't we put all our skills under one common umbrella? If we tilted that umbrella like this, every one of those small green circles within the large green circles is these 20 people covered under one common umbrella called the Plant Life Group. We can start to put names on it. Mine's in an inner circle, there folds. Parmenter's right there with me. That's our board of directors. So we have an accounting and business management expert, if you will, a contractor and developer, real estate person. We have a horticulturist with a degree from Michigan State University heading up our growing team, which one of my colleagues here, Mike, is part of. Mike's also on the technical side of things, so some of the things he started to answer for you earlier are in his area of expertise. We have our PhD and world-renowned scientist, Dr. White there, and we have our engineering expert, Mike Fox there. That's what that circle looks like when we look at those faces. And again, if I may, we truly believe that all those things I mentioned to you earlier, all those things I personally may have been exposed to, my colleagues have been exposed to in many different ways with many experts in many teams that they were part of. Collectively, our talents, we believe, are unparalleled. And everywhere I've taken this presentation, especially throughout Saginaw County, doing what we needed to do there to jump the hurdles answer those difficult questions that villages and city councils and township boards were asking, we brought our team and we brought our expertise. Truly believing, I practice what I preach, I practice what I teach, success breeds success. If we were to look at our individual bios, which you will certainly have this slide deck when we're done, please do so. I think you would tend to agree. We have a lot of experience here. We've done a lot of unique things. Bo and I, in particular, within Saginaw County, have worked hand in hand with our economic development arm, Saginaw Future, and with our Chamber of Commerce there. We've been presented awards for our development in 2 different fields, as a contractor, as a carbide tool owner and manufacturer, and they're excited that this team is assembling and this type of talent is bringing this type of project into Saginaw County within the Chusning Village. Our grower, a sad story here because Bo mentioned it, that our grower, Zach, lost his mother to a very aggressive brain cancer. And some of the products that are a byproduct of what we're trying to do with plant life would possibly help her and possibly cure her. I know I have several family members that have gone through similar cancer things, and it brought me out of retirement to take the helm of this and be a managing member and to develop a business plan so unique and so different than any other you may see. But we traveled here tonight to share it with you and give you a little bit of idea of who we are, what we're all about, and how we're approaching a project in Chusning, and would probably use the same techniques in approaching the project here in Manistee. Dr. White just was awarded the 2018 Entrepreneur of the Year at Central Michigan. Put this in perspective. CMU is the 4th largest university in the state of Michigan, and currently has a population of about 25,000 students a year. So to be named out of all the alumni a particular Entrepreneur of the Year in any given year is quite an honor. But he's the 2nd Entrepreneur of the Year on our team. I was humbly bestowed that honor in 2005. And I want to talk about success breeds success, but what happens when success becomes failure? I had a $100 million company going on some very unique tooling, only to have a little thing called housing collapse and banking collapse of 2008 crippled 2 of my larger customers, Chrysler and General Motors. Who would imagine Chrysler and General Motors would go bankrupt? Who would imagine I would have a $500 million tied up in receivables with those 2 companies? Ouch. Ouch. So, I believe that project inspired me to say, wow, you sometimes run up against obstacles you don't anticipate. They don't write a book at Harvard or Stanford or at Central Michigan on how to get out of that. You have to roll up your sleeves, dig in, and get out. And I'm here today because I was able to get out of that and move those companies forward despite those hurdles. So what we're talking about tonight is hurdles, not impossibilities. I might have thought it was impossible to get out of that type of a jam, but you dig in and you do what you have to do. So the questions you're asking about whether you should have a provision center or not are great questions, great dialogue going on. Every community is doing that. What you'll see tonight, though, and I'll try to get through this quickly. I know your time is valuable, and I know it's getting late in the evening, but it's a unique approach to many of the things that we believe are answers to these 5 different types of licenses that the state has made available to us. Here's Michael Fox. In addition to being an engineer, he's the former chair of the Small Business Association of Michigan. So as that chairman, he affected things here in Manistee as well as he did in Saginaw or any other county in our state. Very talented group, very far-reaching. And when you put all of those talents together, you have an unbelievable set of players on this new chessboard called the Medical Marijuana Facilities Act. our plant life business plan starts here in Michigan with a company in Chesaning that is now underway called Plant Life of Michigan. That's a short-term goal. The next step certainly could be your fine town here in Manistee. On the other side of the coin, and I heard that mentioned earlier by, I think, your fire department gentleman, there's two sides to every coin, is that we believe that this model is scalable and can go to other states. So I have listed the future long-term goals are to go to the other 29 states that have already embraced medical marijuana laws, and by the end of this year, some of the dialogue you've had here is this recreational issue and it being on a ballot in November. 14 other states in the United States will be having medical marijuana on their ballot this year. So we could potentially have 43 states, or 86% of the United States, having a common thread, that being medical marijuana laws. Our Congressman Jim Barsha, who we've been in discussions with, is part of a Congress that, when it gets to that point, can probably tie some of the concerns that are at every state level to some federal legislation too. And of course, that would help answer some of the debate going on tonight, and great debate. It's inevitable. You have to discuss these things. Plant Life of Michigan is an award-winning business plan winning 2017 Central Michigan University's New Venture Competition Most Impact on Michigan Venture Award. Our head grower was part of the presenting team, and a gentleman who is now in insurance and will be insuring our entire operations in Chesaning or anywhere in the state. Zach is the gentleman holding the $500 prize for best pitch. Collectively, they were Plant Life of Michigan at that competition. We've taken that business plan, which me in the middle there as their mentor, helped them go through that process. Then we pivoted that program a little bit to embrace the recently and just released, obviously, December 15th of 2017, laws that you've embraced here to some degree and are debating whether you want to go to that provisioning center degree in your community. So I'm proud to tell you that it's an award-winning business plan. Yes, we've embraced the village of Chesaning, and any community. I know Bo has acquired some property here. I know that we feel it's very suitable, but the perfect list of suitability would say, are there existing buildings, and is there land for growth? Is there ample power, sewer, and water services? Is there easy access in and out? Is there any natural protective barriers for added security? And by gosh, when we talk about economic development, is there an established industrial development district? In the case of this particular site, everything on that list exists, and it exists in such a unique way that it makes really one of the most perfect sites within the state for this type of an operation. And this is a growing facility that will embrace the growing side of those 5 different licenses, and within that category, by the way, we've been to seminars, we've been in contact with Lara in the licensing and regulation, and Connie, who's been put in charge of that whole new department just to monitor and regulate and create the laws and process all those applications for this new act. And they had a great seminar at Saginaw Valley State University in January. Most of those licenses won't come out of, quote, her hopper until April. But this particular site will have, as Bo mentioned earlier, 15 different buildings, stacked licenses, and 75,000 plant capacity. It looks like this now if we were to stand on Sharon Road or an extension of Line Street that goes through Chesaning. The inside of this facility is built like a tank. And let me tell you a little history. I don't know if anyone ever heard of Pete Packing or Farmer Pete's Meats, but this building was built in the late 1800s. Farmer Pete's existed from 1895 to 1995 when former Detroit Tiger pitching star Denny McClain robbed the pension funds from Pete Packing and brought this facility to its humble end. a 109-year-old business came to a crashing end in a very sad way. Bo, as a real estate developer, excavator, builder, contractor, bought the building and tore down all the parts of the building that after time were no longer suitable. The core 30,000-foot facility that is here, not only built like a tank, but will be turned in and repurposed. What better can anyone do in society? We talked for some time earlier this evening about rehabilitating sewer lines, for example. Here we're talking about rehabilitating and giving repurpose to an old building. So a plan is in place to repurpose this building. Initially within this building will be a 1,500 plant state-of-the-art grower facility, an adjoining processing facility, a second license under that 5-License Act, our corporate offices, shipping, receiving, quality control, etc. This is an outline from a group we're working with out of Denver, Colorado. This is just one of many designs. They've built over 800 facilities in the United States, and in the last 8 years have really learned what works and what doesn't work. We're going to take the site before and start to clean it up as in after, and a closer look of after would be this. That one building is the footprint of one of those designs that I just showed you. There will be 15 of those added on this site. All the outside of the building in our repurposing gets brought up to current looks architecturally. By the way, I'm very impressed with your chambers here. That circular staircase that I walked up earlier was beautiful. The way you've blended oak, the way this timbers and some of this exists. Wow, what a wonderful job you've done. But that's our philosophy. If we don't have to tear something down, but we can repurpose it, why not bring it back to its original luster? I watched Mike Gillich do that to the Fox Theater. If you've gone to Detroit and seen that theater and the way it was brought back to its original luster, wow. So if this little pawn learned anything from that king, it's about how to do this type of stuff. There are our 15 buildings. Talking about law enforcement, we're in negotiations with the Saginaw County Sheriff Department to bring an auxiliary facility on our site. So they'll have a presence in the community, and it's our outreach. If you're gonna do something in life, why not do it right? Success breeds success. Let's look at all the success stories and how bringing all parties together to do something and do it the best way you possibly can. That's why we've assembled 20 masterminds like we have. We can do something like this. It can be our vision, our plan. And because we've had good successes and learned from masters, we're very capable of accomplishing all this and something similar to this in your fine community. This would be the artist rendition from the road. Of course, you have to go through site plan approval. So as you say, developers, start to show us something, start to do something. This is how we've answered that question in Chesneen, Linda. And this is how that site goes to all 15 different buildings. This is a process of jumping some hurdles there. You're debating whether or not you want a provisioning center. Good debate. The township and village debated of whether the township would have laws or not have laws. And so an annexation approval is in the works to make this whole project that I'm sharing with you tonight and trying to explain my best to you what we're doing possible. Of course, budgets and improvements and all that generate tax dollars to communities. I haven't looked at your budget yet. I don't know what impact a facility that we would do here yet. Hopefully I'll have the privilege to do that. But I can tell you what it means to this community. And this slide, I wish I made it bigger, but the budget this year in tax revenue for the village of Chesnee for 2018 is $556,000 in real estate tax. By the time all of those buildings in our plan are put in place and it's added to the tax roll, this project will double that budget. They'll get $556,000 in taxes just off this project. Our school district will get another $590,000. and the county will get 220,000. And that's just looking at the impact on the county, township, village, and Chesaning Union Schools. We truly believe that a team stands for together, everyone accomplishing more. And perhaps in turning to those members of law enforcement and trying to address the council here as best as possible, we reached out in an aggressive forward motion to say, hey, we don't want crime or any of these issues to be an issue. Let's work with local law enforcement. So the sheriff in the Saginaw County was excited about that. We're also using cameras and technology within our facilities and reaching out to help put those in the town to make sure that a community that has a very quiet, easy demeanor doesn't change. And that's a hard hurdle to jump. But I mentioned to you, humbly, letting you know, success breeds success, but when you have failure, sometimes success, you learn to successfully get out of those failures. So if you put your head to anything and you put your heart to anything, and our group probably has more heart and passion for what we're doing, especially when we all have loved ones that are dying, and yet products from this industry could have maybe prevented that death or prolonged their life, then of course we're teaming together so everyone can accomplish more. This is a site, Bo, that you've lined out here, and you know it better than I do. I appreciate the opportunity to share with you who we are, what we're trying to do, and how we've approached the Chesaning as a model, and answering maybe and painting a picture on the canvas of your minds of what that might look like right here in your own community. So Bo, there by the way, I learned something. It's this button right there, right. And that one's back. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, we can all see the industrial 2 lots right there. 3 buildings per lot is what we were figuring. 72 by 280 is the dimensions on those. Let's show the parking. We've got the parking lot on the one side. We did a buffer for the landscaping. Metal roofs, metal facade to keep up with what's currently out there. Probably won't go with that particular roof color. It's just what was put out at the time. Probably go with something a little bit more neutral, probably a white or a light gray a lot of the times we like to go with. Sometimes charcoal. The egress and entrances all landscaped, and the curb and gutter, bring everything up to current code. Fencing around the perimeter of the property. Shipping and receiving, which is actually very minimal for it. If we have to take it out to the dispensaries, it will be done internally. They will pull in and load inside and then leave, so nothing will be carried outside. If there by chance is a provisioning center on site, secured transport will come there and move that to the provisioning center within the building, so everything will be secured and monitored at that point. Weighed, documented, and entered in Fran, which is the tracking system for all of it. So that's all of them. A lot of them are duplicates, just different angles. I had about 25 pictures, I think, total.
And I wanted to inject this. He's now showing you a little vision of the site right here in town and where we would like to go with it. I didn't finish my work, and I apologize. That 2-page list comes from a group that's been in the business under the 2008 laws in Ann Arbor, Michigan. They run a top-notch, first-class dispensary in the process of switching over to a provision center called Ohm of Michigan. They're even conducting studies in conjunction with University of Michigan on how we can bridge a gap between traditional medicine and holistic medicine, or those medicines coming out of the cannabis industry. the question of a provision center and all of the things, especially the homework Linda has done, and I refer to you a lot, Linda, because Arizona, my gosh, what's going on out there and doing that homework, good job. Again,
They
Colorado.
have family there.
Yes. So what has impressed us the most, and to keep that image that we're trying to go for, best of the best, and only create the best products and help and target those certain illnesses and diseases that those products are going to be instrumental in. One of the things that OMA has done, and they did it out of frustration by a U of M graduate who was a doctor and could not turn to traditional medicine for a cure for excruciating, debilitating migraine headaches. For anyone who gets a migraine headache, man, it can take you down. It would take him down so often that he couldn't do what he needed to do as a medical doctor. No treatment that is in MDA or FDA circles was working. So he tried some CBD oils, and lo and behold, slowly got away from those migraines to the point where they've gone. In that, he took a pivot of his own. We talk about pivots, it's just part of good business planning. If this isn't working, pivot, make the right directional change. You're doing that with your sewer system. It's failed after years of serving you, it's time. So I bring all this up and try to tie it together to hopefully answer the questions as best as possible, but there's many moving targets here. We could lay the best laid plans of mice and men, as you've seen tonight, but we'll make pivots along the way too, to embrace what's working and what's not working, to address those concerns that you've all shared. But we're approaching this to only try to associate with provisioning centers or bring a community like yours, a strategic partner of ours, that has that type of first-class operation that you might want to embrace. Then maybe because you can control the ordinances you set and almost design a plan that fits what you want, it can choose who those are going to be by selecting it. And that's how we've worked with Chesaning in doing that. They have the same concerns that you do, but they're approaching it and controlling it in a very forthright manner, and yet looking at all those concerns and taking those steps, step by step, to get it done. In town, and we didn't have it as part of the slide deck, and believe me, every time we go to a community, we have different slides and want to make different points, especially when you tell us what your concerns are. We're doing a second project, and there's a tie-in, and it's taking an old school and turning it into an addiction clinic. There is a huge opioid problem throughout the United States. We have that problem right within our state. We've identified 2 target markets, even the tribal community within all the gaming casinos. There's a huge problem in their tribal community because they came into a lot of money. They bought and paid for their houses, they bought and paid for their cars and all their toys. Then they led a rather robust party style and got addicted to drugs and alcohol in ways that need major help. For those people in veterans, and we have several veterans among our group of 20, we have another major problem, and that is they were given drugs to deal with the injuries that they incurred protecting the lives of democracy and people like us and people like me, so I can come and make a presentation to you by serving their country, maybe coming home with some issues that needed to be addressed, doctors putting them on pain management things of an opioid, Oxycontin nature, getting addicted to it, and then saying, now what do I do? There is beautiful medicine and great research, but not approved at the FDA level. It will take a congressman, an ex-congressman like Jim Barsha to help us get into those political circles to do it. But what I want to share with you tonight is that we've positioned ourselves, we're poised in position for that to happen. And what that means is there could be a perfect way to introduce a provisioning center that did good under controlled situations with only the products you want, and we hope to do that right in Chesaning, weaning people off opioids and using cannabis alternatives that aren't addictive and have proven time after time, especially through these studies through Ulm, Michigan is one, or Ulm Medicine in Ann Arbor, Michigan is one example. Yes, this industry in Michigan is new, but we've learned what's going on in Colorado, what's going on in Idaho, what's going on in California, and all those other states. And while it's new here, we believe that looking at all of that, trying to put a perfect puzzle or a perfect solution to the puzzle, that we've come up with a pretty good set of solutions that we've presented to you tonight. They'll continue to get fine-tuned. We'll pivot here and there, but I think it's a solution you're not seeing from other groups. We only want the best. We're going to be very selective. We're only going to associate with the best transportation groups, the best provisioning centers, and as Thad said earlier, hey, you have a glut of product on the market. You can build a facility like I said, but you better simultaneously be preparing yourself and creating strategic alliances within that distribution network, now called provision centers under the Act. So I hope all of that dialogue I've shared with you, although long-winded, helps, because you've been putting and investing a lot of time in what you want to do in your community, and that's how we've answered problems in Chesney and how we're dealing with them head-on to be the shining star in their community. Thank you both.
Hey, questions, or I got a couple possible suggestions that I would entertain if I was sitting in your seat trying to make the decision that you guys are making.
Well, the big thing, decision-wise, is will we go ahead and have a special session and have a robust discussion, open to the public discussion on the idea of provisioning center. I don't know if you got the email I sent out earlier today.
Yes, I responded to that.
But my concern is where are we going? How are we moving along with the process for what we've already given? As Councilmember Beaton would point out, some months ago, an attorney came in representing a client, and the first request was for a provisioning center standalone, no growing. They just wanted to open a provisioning center. And council wasn't very receptive to that. When the idea of the economic development and jobs and other opportunities came in with the growing and processing center and limitations, that resulted in the ordinances being created, but the understanding at that time was provisioning center wasn't part of it, and that's not what we've included in the ordinance. Planning and zoning has indicated that it would be 5 different public hearing opportunities if we were to amend the ordinance and go that direction. So I think we just need to figure out where and when and how we want to publicize the idea of a more robust discussion with the public and gather some input on it.
Yeah, with the drawings, obviously, we're moving forward. Like I said, it's second in queue right now to another project that the deadline's the 27th. So after that, then our construction phase starts there. So then my office staff that's working on the planning and everything on that one and finalizing floor plans and everything on that one can move on to this one on the clerical end and get everything else processed on your end as well on that. I mean, something that would be a good consideration possibly would be provisioning centers for only somebody that's put a cultivation center here. If somebody's put a cultivation center here, they've proved that they've got $500,000 cash in their bank account. They've proved they met all the criteria. Obviously, they're meeting the security criteria, the scent criteria, they're the chemical wash-off criteria. They're meeting all your current criteria, so it's all going to be handled within one facility, and then you don't have multiple facilities of that. Something to possibly consider. Another thing would be medical only. They don't have anything they can smoke. I mean, it's an option that you guys could entertain as well, where they can just get oil or cream or the medicine purpose only. Obviously, the decision is up to you and the community, but I'm just throwing ideas out there. Or another option is limit the number of THC. Obviously, everything's going through a lab, so we know what the THC is going to be on for everything. Obviously, if somebody's got cancer and they're in 4th stage, they are going to have some pain, so they might like a small section of, small quantity of THC in theirs. That's something that can, of course, be limited and monitored, and your ordinance can go around, of course, providing that's
I
something.
believe
the
when it's
community
graded,
wants.
it gives you the amount, what we saw at the Provisioning Center in Detroit, it's graded and it gives you the amount of THC, the percent in that product, just like it would on a bottle of
Yes.
wine or alcohol, it gives you the percent of alcohol.
Right, and now it's a lot more stringent, of course, being legalized, because everything has to go through a PhD tested facility.
Have you made any applications for any licenses for, do you have, I understand there's two ways you can do this. You can apply for A and B license, or you can apply for an A license, which you go through all the criteria, but you don't have a place to grow yet. Have you applied for any of those for this area, or?
No, we haven't went for any here. You have to have your SUP approved before you do that.
SUP?
Special use permit.
Okay.
That has not been done here. Once we get that done, then that's the next step.
Any other question?
No.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Okay. Item E, discussion on food trucks.
It's past my bedtime. Okay. About a year ago, we started talking about a policy for food trucks. I have worked with the DDA. We've taken it to the Parks Commission. It's gone through staff. It's quite a detailed process, but I sent you the information before the meeting, so you had a chance to look at it. So what it is it sets up an administrative process for how we will deal with food trucks within the city of Manistee. We define them, and it's not just a truck. It can be a non-motorized vehicle, trailer, or other device that can be portable, so it could be a smaller, like a hot dog stand, something of that nature. We define several different things: how you operate vendor, mobile food vending unit, and the food vending itself. The hours of operation have been broken down actually into zoning districts, such as a residential district, private property between 9 a.m. 9 p.m. I could see somebody who has a graduation party, wants to have a food truck come in for their party, but it has to be within those hours. Commercial districts on private property between 6 a.m. and 11 p.m. And industrial properties, private property during the business hours of the business on site. So some people may have 2 shifts. They might want to have a food truck come in later, but that's during their operational hours for that particular industrial use. Then we discuss hours for city properties. This went through the Parks Commission. We have the boat launch and fishing areas from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. That includes Arthur Street Boat Launch, First Street Boat Launch, Fish Cleaning Station area, the Lions Pavilion area, the 9th Street Boat Launch, and the North Beach Access parking lot. The other ones would be the beaches from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. We wanted to make sure and protect the people who have the concession stands, so they can't be located within 700 feet of the concession stand at First Street Beach. That actually knocks out all of Fifth Avenue Beach. But we also provided within the Douglas recreational area at First Street Beach, like the Rotary Park area, the Ball Diamonds between 9 a.m. 9 p.m. for those also. And this shows you the 700-foot radius between at the concession stand at First Street Beach. We have the neighborhood parks from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. That includes Duffy Park, Hamlin Field parking lot, that's next to the Armory, Mack Park, Man-Made Lake, Morton Park, Red Schmark Park, Reeds Park, Sands Park, and the Riverwalk that is outside of the DDA. Within the DDA district, I want you to know the locations and hours were established by the DDA. It's from 9 a.m. till 10 p.m., and that would be on city public property at the city marina. That would be the parking space on Spruce Street between River Street and River Walk, on-street parking spaces at the Triangle, the Fountain area, Memorial Drive parking lot, North River Walk and Veterans Memorial Park, and on private property. We have rules that covers all food trucks, no matter what location they're at. Their waste containers, they can't utilize city containers to throw garbage in. They have to provide their own waste receptacles. Talk about how they can be parked, that they have to have permission from the city or property owner. Talked about how events will be handled, about lighting, noise, signage. Can't leave the units unattended for more than 2 hours at a period of time. How they can hook up their power, and also how they handle their gray water and untreated waste. The permits that they will need will be outside of the city. They need the health department, Department of Ag, proof of insurance has to be provided to the city if they're on city-owned properties. They have to be inspected by the fire department. Brent has gone through, we've developed the application form. As you went through that application form, you could see all of the different criteria they had to meet in order to apply for an application. These applications are good for a calendar year from January 1 to December 31. They are not transferable. And if you fail to comply, you can have a cancellation of your license, a civil infraction. And the fee that we discussed in, Thad reached out to some other communities, and we went with a $250 annual fee for food trucks. And this will also result in a change that has to happen to Chapter 862 vendors that pretty much handles vending within the DDA district in order for them not to have a conflict between that license and their vending license. We will remove all the language relating to foodstuffs within Chapter 862, which is item D. That's all I have.
That's all.
That's all.
Yeah. Wow.
Any questions?
I have a lot, but I'll save them for you at a later date as opposed to keep everybody here.
That would be great.
I'm mostly opposed to the idea of the food trucks and some of the locations that they're presented. I really liked Traverse City that has a food court. They have a specific area. We got this art park location that would make a wonderful conversion to parking pads and permanent locations for such things, but
That is a discussion that the DDA has had, and it's actually kind of tied into that MSU plan.
I'm opposed to the First Street Beach location because a vendor pays us a monthly fee to operate down there, and I don't want to put competition even within 700 feet of that vendor. But again, I'll drop by and share my concerns with you.
That's right.
Would the food vendors be allowed to say, like the Riverside Motel, that's for sale? Would they be able to put their truck there?
With permission from the property owner, yes. Similar to how the Talk About It taco truck was at Olson's.
Right.
But what this does is it brings it into where they have to be inspected. So there is somebody going through inspecting it, regulating them and everything. And for the events, they also have to be inspected for the events. Everybody's got to play by the same ball.
They need to have an annual fee if they're on private property?
Anywhere in the city.
Okay.
Questions, comments? Nope. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Mr. Taylor, anything else?
Not at this time.
Did it go? Public Works Director. Public Safety. City Engineer, you ate up a lot of time already. You want some more? Mr. Bradford, CFO.
Looking forward to tax revenue from the new development.
I'm sure. Mr. Cooper.
Nothing.
Nothing.
Yes, Linda brought up the other day, just real quick, she brought up the fact about selling city property and that money should be earmarked for local streets. I would want to know if council would be interested in discussing that. Is there a consensus here about that, or?
Well, yeah, I'm absolutely.
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks for the backup, Roger.
A consensus to have it discussed, yes. To make a decision right now, no.
No.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Just discussed.
Just
Yes.
discuss.
Yeah.
I just want to read the new marijuana law.
Sure.
I just want to read that marijuana law.
Nothing.
Nothing. Thanks to everybody for their patience and endurance tonight. Thanks to the visitors for coming and speaking. Motion to adjourn.
Yep.
I need to talk to you.